All right. Hello, 14ers, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is April 20th, 2025. And you know what I'm going to say? Some people, it's fine. Others, it isn't. But I'm going to say happy Easter to everybody as we know to observe the reason for the season. Now, of course, we understand, we've come to understand quite a bit here. And one of the things we know is that just like the original 14thers, hello 14ers, we know that historically there was a dispute back in the beginning between Easter and when they celebrated the death and resurrection of Christ, and we know that it was actually a week ago. All right, so the real resurrection time was last week, and we know it from the 14th of Nisan, the first day, the 14th day of the first month, and sorry, to the 16th. So we're aware that this isn't the time, but you know what? We're not Pharisees and Sadducees. We're not trying to split hairs in relation to it's a great time because the world gets to hear about Christ more than any other time, with the exception of Christmas. All right, so in that sense, we can rejoice. Jesus is being proclaimed, he's being talked about more on this day than just about any other day of the year. So, with that, I say happy Easter, though full well knowing real Passover and resurrection was about a week ago. All right. So, with that, brothers and sisters, yeah, it's Easter, and here I am just after dinner time, and I'm doing a teaching. It's like, what am I doing a teaching on Easter for? Well, we had our family get together. You know, my wife's side of the family is all here in Calgary, and we have dinners every Sunday. And we had this Sunday, we did a brunch instead. And my sister-in-law loves making all sorts of games and little Easter egg hunt and everything else, even though all the kids are growing up. And you know, it's great because even though they're flat out atheists, my mother-in-law is a Buddhist. You know, Jesus gets brought up, even if it's briefly, because nobody wants to hear about it, and they know what I do for a living. They know my family's belief with my wife, my son, and my daughter as well. And so it's in the air more than ever at around Christmas time and Passover as well, or I should say at Easter. Both dates at which we know aren't really connected to Christ directly, but indirectly we know that's where the world is. So sometimes you just meet them there, and prayerfully one day it'll make its way through. With that, what we're going to go into today, even though we will go back into much more of Isaiah in the coming weeks and months as things continue for the next little bit, as you know. Sadly, not very many people are interested in the revelation of Isaiah, which is crazy, because it is the revelation of the end of days built in throughout the chapters of Isaiah to the books of the Bible. And so we're going to get back to that or continue with that in future videos as well. But today is one that I was saying, God willing, we will get to it, and we've gotten to it. And I want to say a thanks, a shout out to our sister Tammy, who helps me with all these charts, and I send back to her. She builds them all, and then I tell her where I want this and where I want that and where it points to, and then she gets back, and there's a little something here and a little something there, and she's just right on it for us. So I appreciate our sister Tammy for that. And today, as we get into this teaching about the revelation of, you know, we used to be like so many, like just about everybody out there. You know, is it going to run on a Tishri? Is the end of days going to run on a Tishri beginning of the year at a sowing and reaping? Or is the end of days going to begin at a Nisan beginning of year and run it through its years? Because those really are two true years of which things begin in. And from the creation to Moses, there wasn't a specific name for a year. There was no time of month one being Nisan until Exodus 12, as we've talked on many times recently. But it was always a sowing and a reaping time. So it went from the fall through to the spring, sowing and reaping, right? So fall through winter, spring through summer. And it wasn't until Exodus 12 that we get that the first month now, the year, the beginning of your years, the beginning of your months, your days, they start here. And we, of course, know that that began month one, day one for the start of the year, which is what they now call Nisan. And for years, like so many, we would go from, oh, it's Nisan. The time would pass and we keep looking and be like, but there's so much even pointing to Tishri. Is it going to be Nisan? Is it going to be Tishri? And the answer had always been for a long time, as you guys know, okay, if it is, what about the above? And then we've really revealed the understanding of the above, as you guys know. We go to the above. I'm trying to go to things without fully going to everything yet, right? We go to the above, and we know that the 50 days come before the 14 years start. And for the longest time, we had the 50 days go from, of course, the 5th month to the 7th month, the fasting in the morning of the two, and then the 14 years beginning at Tishri. And then, of course, we get the revelation from John chapter 4. And John chapter 4, when Jesus says it would be 4 months early from where the harvest is about to start, speaking about winter wheat, which is the wheat planted at the same time as barley in the fall, but takes longer before it starts growing. And we know it's very late spring to very, very early summer, and which is around the 3rd month, 15th day would be around that time that it starts. And so after all of this, we knew everything was connected to this count in the timing of the Feast of Weeks. And what we did last year, as you recall, I've talked about it many times since then, is we had this incredible teaching that started right here. Is it a mirror? And that was the realization that what we were counting from a year count in Nisan, we just mirrored it in a count from a year being in Tishri as a sowing and reaping starting of a year, or kind of a year. And that brought us, of course, to the 11th month, 9th day, the 8th to the 9th day. And lo and behold, that worked out from the pre-trib to the return of the Lord after the wedding, after the pre-trib wedding takes place. The Lord returns, as you know, on the 8th day as the Son of Man for 40 days. And that is the 4 months early that he was talking about. And that, of course, equals the new year of trees. We've nailed this down. We've understood it. And within it, we got the revelation that, wait a second, it's not playing on only Nisan. It's not playing on only Tishri. But the years, the end of days, are a combination of things happening based off of a Nisan count and based off of a Tishri count. And this is what we're going to go into today. And what I thought was so fascinating, I had a couple conversations with people about it recently, is that I had that everything was like I said, it was either Nisan or either it was Tishri, and then it was locked into Tishri until we got the revelation from John chapter 4, and Jesus talking about 4 months early, and how that equaled the story of Jacob with Leah and Rachel and all of that. And what I thought was interesting was that in the past few months, since that revelation, we had been tracking it, of course, to this period right here in 2025. And as we were tracking it from the mirror teaching in the fall of 2024 to this time, it had never dawned on me that some of the books in our chapters to years, that some of these books, the reason they were a little bit, like, sometimes they seemed like maybe it was a little bit off, but I knew they were in the right place. But there was something of a glitch within a couple of them that still had me scratching my head. And I thought it was fascinating because of this. In the fall months since the mirror, until we got to this time and it came and went, never once was I prompted to believe there was a sense of this understanding within the books of the chapters to years. That, and what I mean by that is I didn't realize that it could be telling us that some of the books are running on a Tishri year and some of the books are running on a Nisan year. That's where they start. Some will start at a Tishri year beginning and some will start in a Nisan year beginning. That never dawned on me until after we passed this time and we realized that it wasn't going to be a Nisan year that starts before a Tishri year. Meaning, yes, we'll see, as you know, that the tribulation, there's the 50 days, is before Nisan 1, when then the 14 years of tribulation will begin. However, there is also a 14-year count that goes from a Tishri start of the year. Okay? Just pretend I'm looking at 2026. And what we did and why this was so great was because when we did the count last year of the mirror, we did it based on what it was like at the beginning of creation, before Exodus 12. Everything was running on a sowing, then reaping. And it wasn't until later with Moses that it went from a Nisan to Nisan year. And so from that fall revelation and doing the mirror, we began our count from a Tishri count, which is how we ended up getting to our February count, which was a mirror of the 5th month, 9th day until Tishri. You see, we've done studies on this, we've taught on it, we've broken it down. And what was fascinating is the fact that to get to this count, to get to the revelation that this was the beginning of the end of days, the pre-trib here in what we believe is going to be 2026, and the Son of Man coming and beginning the 40 days here after the week wedding in 2026, was we were applying the count as it was in the beginning before Moses. And then from the count as it starts the time of Moses, we end up going to Nisan, like the Lord told Moses as they were fleeing and going out of Egypt. So we already had the revelation. But what I didn't yet understand is what we're going to go into today, and that I've touched on a little bit with you guys, giving you a little hint in relation to like the book of Ezekiel. And we're going to go into the book of Ezekiel today. We're going to go into the book of John, and we're going to go into the book of Zechariah, and we're going to see these two ways play out in Ezekiel as a Nisan, in John as a Tishri, and in Zechariah, it's going to sound odd at first if you know what I'm talking about, if you've been tracking, that Ezekiel is a Tishri count. Now that sounds weird if you guys have been following for a bit, because Ezekiel talks about the 70th year, right? But it doesn't start with the 70th year. So we're going to get into that. We're going to break this all down. And what it's founded on is the revelation of the chapters to years. And it's going to be based on what I gave you guys a clue on in a previous teaching about how Ezekiel chapter 47 says certain things in it which are not things that can happen in the 14th year of tribulation as we've taught it, because the 14th year is the days of Noah, the final year and 10 days to the declaration of the Jubilee, which means there was something else going on in Ezekiel within this 14-year count. And what the revelation was Ezekiel is a Nisan year. And then when I went and looked up more, we're going to see John is a Tishri year. All right? Excuse me. So it's quite fascinating. And you're going to notice, like when we get to John, for example, if the 7th chapter is here, yet we have the conversation of the pre-trib in the first part of John chapter 8. And in John chapter 8, in the conversation, it's the conversation of the end of Luke 21's discourse at the pre-trib. It's the conversation of the woman standing before the Lord like in a proposal. And then it's the Lord starting his 40 days as the light coming in the darkness. The only way that could happen is if it's in the 8th chapter based on our chapters to years, it means that it must be a Tishri start, because the 8th is also called what? 8 can also be referred as the first. So you could be like 7 days a week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Just like the years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 1 is also the 8th day, the 9th day, the 10th, 11th, 12th, right? So the first can also be the 8th. And you'll see more of what I mean when I get there. And it'll become clear if you're tracking here with me. But I don't expect you to get it just off of me saying that. But I'm giving you a little hint to be able to see this and to track this a little bit, to prepare your mind so that when we get there, you'll be like, oh, because it's wild. Which means this chart, I don't know how we would adjust this chart, though we have to change these years. What really happens within this is from a Tishri count, which means it's still playing half here and half here, while this in Ezekiel is the Nisan year. So this could be like Nisan to Nisan, and Tishri would be like from Tishri to Tishri right here. So they would kind of 6-month overlap between them, going back and forth, back and forth. And we're going to see how important it was in the revelation of Ezekiel 47 being in the 14th year, how that revealed the answer. It's really wild. So we're going to get into all that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know it was a long opening. I'm sorry for the length, but there's so much to this, and it's so wild, and it's not going to be for people who are new. New people who are tuning in now, feel free to watch this, but we're talking about 7.5, close to 8 years of revealing the revelation of Jesus Christ from the Word, with a key that began in the Gospels on September 8th, 2017. And it has been a wild ride, proven from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation, over and over and over again. And now with the book of Isaiah opening to it as well. Excuse me. And now this realization that the reason we couldn't understand Nisan or Tishri is because there's a combination of both playing out through the whole thing. And what I was getting at with John is so important, because within that, we realized that we had to be, in the Gospel of John, we had to be in a year 1, meaning it could not have been a Sabbath year, which we're in right now, until Tishri of 2025. So just hold on tight. You'll track it. You'll see it. It's going to be very exciting. And there's going to be a lot of details. You're going to see why I have, excuse me. You'll understand also why there's 4 different charts. They're all the same chart, but we have to use 4 different ones for each of the books and for the opener, because there's no way we can fit all the details. And just imagine when we're going through this, guys, that the details you're going to see, this is only some of the details from 3 of the books. It's not even all of the details from the 3 books, and it's not even all the details from all of the other open books, as well as the book of Revelation and the Gospels. It would be a madhouse of writing on one chart if it was to be on one chart. We wouldn't be able to do it. It would be microscopic wording. It's crazy. All right? So, with that, anybody that is new and is going to get twisted in watching today's video, I'm going to recommend, as I always do, you come to this playlist. Go to the playlist link right here, or go to ministryrevealed.com. On the menu, click Intro and watch the first 4 teachings there. You can download them, one-click download for free as well to your device if you'd like. But this right here, click on this Intro to the End Times Revelation, and this will be the first video that pops up. These are the first 4 that are key to unlocking the revelation of the end of days, to understanding what is happening, what the mystery is in the revelation of the end of days. This one right here is a 22-minute intro to give you a little insight as to what the next 3 are going to talk about. The second one is the key. This is the key. It's the differences within the Gospels. So we call it Who the Gospels Are Speaking to, and it's a 30-minute Bible study into some of the most straightforward differences within the Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, which reveal in the end of days that the last will be first, the first will be last, and it goes Luke, Mark, Matthew. All right? And it's important to understand that it goes Luke, Mark, Matthew in the end of days. That is the revelation. And what you're going to see is that there are differences within the same stories that have confused people for centuries. And the answer is Luke is speaking to the pre, Mark is speaking to the mid, and Matthew is speaking to the post. Yep, you guessed it. Pre, mid, and post are all true, and you'll begin to understand it in this right here. This is just a 30-minute intro. From there, what you're going to realize is, because once you realize that, then that means the discourses are all different periods of time, you'll realize that the end of days is not 7 years, but 14 years long. The tribulation years revealed. Another 30-minute intro to the basic points that show the 14 years and a short period of time called above, which is the 50 days I mentioned earlier. These are going to blow your mind, but if you don't first understand this, nothing else we talk about will make sense. And then you're going to say, as you start to go through this and your mind starts to open and the Spirit starts revealing it to you, you're going to come to this one, because your question is going to be, oh my goodness, how did we not know all of this? How did we not already understand it after hundreds and hundreds, almost 2,000 years? The answer is, number one, it wasn't yet time. Answer number two, it's all because of Matthew. We've all foundationally been taught from the Gospel of Matthew for hundreds and hundreds of years, generation after generation, and only going to Mark and to Luke for a little bit of insight as to what they can correlate in the understanding of the is. And what that means is, from creation to Christ is was. From Christ to the moment of the pre-trib is the is, and the is to come is from the pre-trib until the end. And the was and the is will both play out in the end of days. But it hadn't been understood, because why there were differences in the Gospels, even though some people knew there were different groups being spoken to, they never went in to apply what that meant in relation to it speaking to different groups. So everybody just continued to teach from the Gospel of Matthew. And so when it comes to prophecy, which is what we're all about, is the revelation of the end of days, everybody goes to Matthew chapter 24 and only sees 7 years. They go to the beginning of creation and they pile it all into one story, and they only see 7,000 years. This is the key. The Gospels will open up, and you will understand the reason we never fully understood was because we've all been taught foundationally from the Gospel of Matthew, so everybody only has 7-year eyes. It's beautiful. It'll blow your mind if you take the time to seek it and search it out. Pray over it. Let the Spirit lead you, and you will see it for yourself. All right? So now, with that, let's get this party started. Okay, we're going to start on just the standard Tishris and Nisans, okay? And you're going to see how it gets laid out. Now, we've talked about what we're going to talk about here. We've talked about it before, but I'm going to give you a little bit more detail within it and let you see how it lays out and why it's lined up the way it is for this year, that on Nisan 1 began the final true, final option, final possibility of all possibilities of the 70 years coming to an end. Because that, in the last 50 days, is the pre-trib events that happen, and then the 14 years that the Red Horse Rider begin at Nisan 1. So, with that, we're back here at the birth of Christ. Now, in the birth of Christ, on the on a Gregorian calendar, which is these years in the middle, this is Nisan counting side, from Nisan to Nisan. This is from Tishri to Tishri, sowing and reaping. Okay, so this is your sowing and reaping Tishri side in red. This is your Nisan to Nisan year counts, as the Lord told Moses. And this in the middle is our Gregorian year counts. Now, when you go look at the sun, moon, and stars, or stellarium and those types of things, there is a year zero. But in a Gregorian calendar, they've accounted that they put no year zero, which means they had to account for year 1, -2, -3, and so they've done that all the way through in the record books. And that's why we need to make sure we understand it with a no year zero, okay? If there was a year zero, then this -2 would be 1 BC. And then this would be 0 and 1 AD and so forth, okay? So if you were to go look on Stellarium, this would be happening in 1 BC, okay? But on a Gregorian calendar, no year zero, it becomes 2 BC. And what we find out is Jesus' birth happened in 2 BC. Now, yes, I have flip-flopped over the years, because when times were coming and we thought it was the year and it doesn't come, then we consider looking at another place for Jesus's birth. But I am going to stick where I said I was convinced with before, and that is that Jesus's birth was on June 17th of 2 BC, which is the third month, 15th day of the Hebrew calendar. So 2 BC on the third month, 15th day. Now, let me show you reasons why I believe that is. And I'm going to start right here in the book of Jubilees. In the book of Jubilees, who do we know Christ is a picture of? Not even from the book of Jubilees, but even just from Scripture. We know that Isaac is the promise as Christ is the promise. Okay? Isaac is a picture of Jesus, is a typology. And we find out in the book of Jubilees that Isaac was born on the third month, middle of the month. He was born on the 15th day of the third month. Okay? He was then, they talk about his circumcision on the 8th day, like Christ then had on the 8th day. But there's more than just Isaac. When Christ came, who was Christ? Christ was also what? He was from Judah, right? He was from the line of Judah. And what do we find out about Judah? Judah was born on the 15th day of the third month, according to the book of Jubilees as well. So we've got two pictures of Christ, one as when he came as the tribe of Judah, one as him being the typology of Isaac, and both of them are recorded in the book of Jubilees as being the third month, 15th day. That's one reason. The other reason is, of course, without us going into it, you guys all remember the story of the Star of Bethlehem, right? This lawyer that had gone out and then started teaching it everywhere, right? And he's been teaching it for decades. We talked about this in the past, that there was an atheist guy who had to do the story of Bethlehem, excuse me, of the birth of Christ. He was an atheist working at a planetarium, and they did it to attract people to the planetarium to get them in there. And of course, what ends up happening, this guy does it through reading of scriptures to understand it and to track it, and he brings it to the exact same conclusion that this guy did, that it began in 2 BC. Where was I? Where was I in my... Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second here. That Jesus, his conception began in 3 BC, right? Or a 2 BC in Stellarium. And then he was born in 2 BC, 9 months later. And all of this was tracked based on the sun, moon, and stars, and the triple conjunction of was it Jupiter, I think, going back and forth, right, with Regulus. So we have the book of Jubilees, we have what the stars showed and the planets moving back and forth, and then the great conjunction at the end of 9 months, that these things were really quite convincing. But there's something more as well. And that is Luke chapter 3. In Luke chapter 3, this is something we hadn't talked on before, and it never dawned on me until I was talking with our brother Jake. And he had brought it up. And the reason he brought this up is because this is the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. And I always talk about it in relation to Christ and the timing of his baptism. But even before Jesus showed up on the scene, John the Baptist came from the wilderness and started to preach. Well, John's preaching when he came out of the wilderness began 6 months before Christ's, which means not only was Jesus baptized in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, but so was John's ministry started in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Okay? This is important. Let me show you. I keep going here because I do have my other charts, but I want to stick with these here. So if we know that this is Jesus's birth, and we track it all the way through, okay, all the way through to when Jesus was baptized. So in Luke chapter 3, which is supposed to be the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, I'll show you that in a moment. It says Jesus completed, right? Jesus began to be 30 years of age in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. So Jesus's birthday, right around this line here, which is about June-ish, right? Usually early-ish, mid-ish June, the first half of June, generally, right in here. Well, it had to be the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. So if we go back to where Caesar's reign began, it would have had to have begun in right here, which in the Gregorian calendar would have been the 14th year, and it would have been sometime around Tishri. Well, it turns out that Tiberius Caesar began to reign on September 17th, 14 AD. Let me show you. Tiberius Caesar's reign as Roman Empire officially began September 17th, 14 AD. Why is that important for us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15. So this is the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar's reign. Jesus is born on the third month, 15th day in 2029 in the 15th year. Now, it's 2029, but what we're really looking for is what? The 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. John, his ministry also began 6 months before Jesus' ministry, his baptism, and it had to also be the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Now, I think this line might be a little bit off, but it's right in around here, which would have been about what? Which would have been about, what does it take it? Right around Christmas time, right? Right around the time of Hanukkah, right? Somewhere right around in here. It was 6 months earlier. Well, guess what? 6 months earlier is still what? The 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. So in Luke chapter 3, John begins his ministry 6 months before Jesus, and it says it's the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, and Jesus gets baptized, and it's also in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. So when we go and look up in the historical documents, when did it say that Jesus began his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar? It said that it was 29 AD. This is right here. Excuse me. It's right here. Black, white, red, blue, green. It's right here. No fancy footwork, no nothing. Just according to historical record and what the scriptures tell us. Okay? So now, what else do we know? We know that it says, yes, the statement is generally accurate. After Jesus' baptism, he began his ministry, which included preaching for approximately a year. How long? For approximately a year. Excuse me. For approximately a year before Luke chapter 4, when he declares the year of the Lord's favor as the Jubilee. Okay? Approximately 1 year. I did it again. For approximately 1 year. So that would take us to what? Here's the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. John starts his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Jesus gets baptized, excuse me, in 29 AD in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar when he turns 30 years old. And it was about 1 year. Well, how long do we have from here to here? We have about 14 or so months. Excuse me, about 14, give or take, months from when Jesus was baptized to when he declared the Jubilee in 30 AD, which is a Tishri to Tishri count, of course. This is where he declared the Jubilee. It was approximately a year. Approximately 14 months is right in that range. Okay? Then, of course, we've got his death and resurrection in 33 AD. All of these things in order with Scripture, with Apocryphas, and with the historical record. When we take it forward, excuse me, doesn't matter if I'm sipping coffee or water. Then when we go to where we are in modern history, we then come and we continued this count. We continued this count of the 7 Sabbaths and Jesus declaring the Jubilee. Okay? He declares the Jubilee, which is after the 49th year is complete, but the Jubilee is also the first year of the next set of counts. So what do? We follow that same count all the way through. And we find out that when Israel came into the land that God gave to them, they were to start. So they came into the land right here in the spring of 1948, and they were told when they came into the land that the Lord gave them, they were to start sowing and reaping. So what do? We continue the sowing and reaping, all the way through. There was a Jubilee, 1990, 1991, and we track it all the way through. Remember, this is tracked all the way from the declaration of Christ with the Jubilee. And we track it all the way through, and this would then equal the next Jubilee, which would be from Tishri of 2039 to Tishri of 2040. So what happens? If we back it up, and back it up, to where we are today, here we are in 2025. We thought that the 70 years was over here last year, and that's why we were so anticipating right here. And we'll touch again briefly on why this didn't happen. You guys know it, but we'll touch on it again. But I want to complete this over here, because this is the stuff that I'm talking about on the sowing and reaping side, which we're talking on, that connects to what we'll be talking about later with John as well, which is the evidence. Okay? The evidence is this. Remember, John, he has 21 chapters, right? So we got the typology, the first 7, right? The first 7 easy years. Hello. If John's chapters to years is 21 chapters, there's your 7 of trumpets, there's your 7 of seals, and there's your first easy 7, which means this right here in 2019, if we've understood finally the year, this was the beginning of the storied typology of John's 21 chapters, in which the focus is the final 14 chapters. But do you see what I'm getting at? If this is the sowing and reaping, which we can't change because of the decree from Christ that we just talked about and proved out, then this could not have been the end of 70 and the tribulation beginning in the midst, with the pre-trib right here and the 14 years beginning in a Sabbath year. Because as you're going to see when we get to John's gospel, the whole conversation of the pre-trib, the bride of Christ, and Christ coming to begin his 40 days is found in John chapter 8. So when you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, what is the 1 after the 7? Well, you can also say it's the 8th year, the 9th year, the 10th year, like the days of a week. There's 7 days in a week. When you get to the first day of the week, you can call it the first day of the week, but if it's the 8th day of the month, you could say it's the 8th day of the month. Okay? And this is what we're finding out. This being John in Tishri that we'll get to later is absolutely where we needed to be, right in here in chapter 8 of John, which is the first year of the 14. It's absolutely awesome. And you know why this makes it even more exciting? Is we touched on it in the previous video, right? In relation to Luke chapter 9, the about in 8 days, where now they're both about in 8, not one just before 7 and the other one 8, but now they're both connected to 8, which is right here, and connected to John chapter 8. This is very, very exciting, because once we realize that there was one final option for a year to add to the 70, it now made sense that the Tishri starts first before the Nisan year starts, which is what I was saying at the beginning. This was a point I was making at the beginning. Remember, we're counting from a Tishri to Tishri. We count from Tishri in the mirror. The same count that we did at Nisan, we photocopied it over, mirrored it over to the fall, And that's how we got to the 11th month, 9th day, the 11/9/9/11, the mirror of the 5th month, 9th day, you see, and then to the start of the 40 days at the New Year of Trees. It has to start at the fall. But what do we know? This is where the events of the pre-trib and stuff will happen, but the literal 14 years after the 50 days events, which will be crazy in themselves, then the 14 years begins from here. Okay? In a what count? In a year's count. But guess what will have already started? The Tishri count of 14 years will have already begun in Tishri of 2025. And brothers and sisters, this gets really interesting because I'm going to show you something on this one. I don't know that it means it for sure, but Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1 is, what does it tell us about? Revelation 12, verse 1, look at what it tells us. This is the part in where it all started with the ministry back in 2017. In Revelation 12, verse 1, it says, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And how many times have you heard me say in 7 years that the pre-trib happens after verse 1, but before verse 2 starts?" I have been saying that like a broken record for years. Well, isn't it interesting that Tishri, the 14 years on a Tishri count, not the official beginning of tribulation, but remember, both sides are going to be playing out in the end of days. Isn't it interesting that the Tishri time is the time of Virgo? Okay? Now, am I expecting another sign within like Revelation 12? No. And you know why? Because when we taught on this back in 2017, in late September, October, what did we show that the word appeared means? It's awesome. Listen to this definition. To gaze, that is with wide open eyes, at something remarkable, thus differing from G991, which denotes simply voluntary observation, and from 1492, which expresses merely mechanical or passive casual vision. What was the Revelation 12 sign of 2017? It was mechanical, passive, and casual vision. It woke up a lot of people. I'm one of that camp, and so are many other people. I'm not saying it wasn't maybe something that caught people's attention to wake them up, but it was mechanical because you really could only see it and understand it from like stellarium. And it was passive. It was casual. The definition for this wonder that's coming is going to be gazing at something with eyes wide open at something remarkable. Is it possible that we're going to see in the time of Tishri of 2025 this event before the Nisan part starts? That gets interesting, doesn't it? That gets interesting. Might we see a Tishri event, a Revelation, the true Revelation 12 event begin in Tishri of 2025? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying we have understood that this is going to be something seen that's going to make us go, what? And we know and have known for years that this comes before the pre-trib. How do we know the pre-trib? Well, we just recently talked about it again, right? We're not going to go into all of it, but remember, the pre-trib happens after verse 1 and right before verse 2. And we know this because when she cries travailing in birth, that represents the 40 days of the Son of Man. Right? Connected to Isaiah 66 verse 7. that we just taught in the last one, and its connection to Revelation, the book of Revelation. We know that before she travailed, she brought forth. That's the pre-trib happening. After verse 1, before verse 2 starts. And then it says, and before her pain, she was delivered of a man-child. That's the 40 days of the Son of Man before the pain. And then the pain in Revelation 12 represents the first about 2.5 years or so of the World War III and everything that breaks out at Nisan, starting with the attack on Jerusalem. So this suddenly gets a little bit more interesting, because here we are in a count on this side that we cannot change. We've known we can't change it. And when it was realized that we can't change it, but there was the option for one more year here, all of a sudden these things open up. All of a sudden there was a realization that some books are counting from this side and some books are counting from this side. But it didn't happen until after we realized there was one more possibility to count. And so what was that one more possibility to count? You guys know it? It was the revelation of Leviticus chapter 19. We know that Israel got Jerusalem and declared it their capital in the spring. It started in April, and then it was later on in spring, summer, that Jerusalem became their capital. We showed the documents. We showed also that other nations had to travel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to meet with the officials in Jerusalem after this time in 1950. According to Leviticus 19, when they come into the land, which means Jerusalem, they also still had to start planting trees. And for 3 years, they had to plant trees and not take from it. Well, the planting of trees is January to February. So they hadn't yet planted trees when they came into the land. In 1951, in January, they planted for the first time. So there they planted, and then you had what? 1, 2, 3 years of planting trees, and then it said the 4th year is to the Lord. And that's where we had left it for so long. That's where we thought it was the end, because it said the 5th year was theirs to eat. But as you guys know, we'll go there just real quickly. As you guys know, we then fully read the rest of the verse. And in the 5th year shall you eat the fruit thereof, that it may yield unto you the increase thereof. Meaning, you had to do this when you came into the land, plant trees, not touch it for 3 years, 4th year give it to the Lord, and to complete the story, you also had to eat the tree, the fruit of the tree in the 5th year, so that from that time forward it would give its increase to you. And that was the piece that realized we still had to add one more year, the 5th year, to when they got Jerusalem as their capital. When we did that, year 1 started at Nisan 1956, and we counted all the way up on the years side, all the way, bam. The 70th year is from Nisan 2025 to Nisan 2026. And then, of course, we know it begins with the Luke portion, the above, which is 50 days, and it starts with the pre-trib. Then there's the 7-day wedding, and there's other events happening on the earth, like the first attack in northern Israel. After the 7-day wedding, the Lord returns as the Son of Man to warn Jerusalem that they're about to be compassed about and destroyed. And when his 40 days are over, he leaves. The workers that were with him will be anointed on the 50th day, and they will go out from Jerusalem to start preaching to the world, beginning from Jerusalem and go out from Jerusalem. And then Jerusalem will be attacked at around Nisan 1, the beginning of Nisan, on the year count side, 70 years having come to an end. You see how that plays out now? Hopefully that was clear. We've shown this cannot change. The alignment of how it equals with the sowing and reaping years, with the no sowing and no reaping years, how it lines up to the end, And once we had that final option for a year added in, it made sense to John, it made sense to Ezekiel, and all of these things started opening up, which gives more, to me, even more abundance of, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's time to get excited. Because even though we've got, I don't know what, 8.5, 9 months, whatever it is, to the 11th month, 9th day on the Hebrew calendar, we have never had, we have had some wild, absolutely incredible revelations over the years. Like, it's insanity how much it continues to build. But this is a precision in account that we've never been able to have before, because we first needed to understand there were two working together, and that we had to start from a Tishri to be able to do the mirror count before we could even get to a Nisan, which means it had to be in the first year of the cycle to equal John 8 in the 8 to 21 as the 14 chapters, and it had to come before the 70 years were over and Psalms 90 and 10 then begins. It's awesome. It's so wild, guys. I hope you're catching it. I hope you're starting to grasp and see just how incredible this is. And you want to talk about eyes wide open, like it told us, right? With wide open eyes, this would be that time like no other, just as Revelation 12:1 we have known happens before the pre-trib. And that connected time frame is apparently, according to what it says, connected to Virgo. This is the time of Virgo. This is pretty awesome. This is an exciting time. I even wonder, guys, if this time right here, as you'll see when we get to the third book, once we get to Zechariah, I think this time right here might be this time that the remnant work or something maybe starts to begin in them more. That maybe there's this practice that starts taking place, and we might start going out more. I don't have the answer. I'm not saying for sure, but there might be something to this period of time right here. And this, if this is the event happening here, that might be what wakes us up. There might be something in it that wakes us up, that the Spirit directs us to start kind of waking up the people before everything starts. I'm not saying it. I'm just suspicious of it. And you'll understand a little bit more when we get to the book of Zechariah. All right? Man, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. So with that, brothers and sisters, let's now go to our brother Ezekiel. You can see right here, Tammy had this done up here. The charts now are established, meaning whenever there's a conversation, I keep this in all of them, the Leviticus 25 and the 19 down low and so forth. But anywhere Leviticus 25 is spoken about, it's always in red with the exception of some highlights. If we're just adding in supporting verses from chapters, like Joel 3:10 here, it's in black. Okay, like Matthew 17:1 over here, it's in black. But Ezekiel, which is what this one is about in this chart, is in gold. Okay? So whenever it's Leviticus 25 on any chart, it'll always be red. Here's Ezekiel, gold, so Ezekiel will always represent the gold, and then of course just added ones in black. Okay? You'll see a different color when we go into John, which is green, and then you'll see another color which is purple when we go into Ezekiel. So there's always that standard of colors. This here is just an exception. It's not the same purple, okay? This is just an exception to the whole revelation from John 4. This is just something here. These guys here just stand on their own talking about the beginning of everything. Now, let's go to the book of Ezekiel. And really, there are things within, of course, Ezekiel 1 and a number of other things that we understand. But our focus is going to be on the main things that people go to. Okay? So we're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 39. We know it's the battle of Gog, right? So it's Gog of Magog. The Lord is going to bring destruction upon them. We know that they're going to burn weapons for 7 years with fire. And then we know there's bearing of the bones, cleansing of the land for 7 months. Okay? Key things that we've talked about, that many people talk about. And in fact, we just did a teaching not too long ago. For those who haven't seen it yet and want to understand it, come right here. This teaching right here proves that it is impossible for the Gog of Magog war of Ezekiel chapter 39 to take place at any point in somebody's 7-year teaching because of what it says. It only makes sense in a 14-year teaching. It's awesome. All right? It's very exciting. So, as we come up here, remember what we come to find out, and you're going to see this as we get to the end of the Ezekiel one, is Ezekiel, his chapters to years are playing out on the Nisan side in their chapters. Now, of course, events are playing out throughout both along the way, but the chapters are giving us insight into Nisan count years. Whereas when we get to John, he's giving us insight in his chapters. In those chapters are events playing out in the Tishri to Tishri years. Okay? And that's where I was saying we're going to be covering Zechariah, Ezekiel, and John. And Ezekiel is playing out in the 14 years, but in a Nisan to Nisan count, whereas John, right here, is going to be playing out as a Tishri to Tishri. So I don't know how we're going to restructure this one, but for now, you can grasp what I'm saying. And so look at what we see here. In chapter 39, which is the 6th year of seals, is the Ezekiel 39 war. Well, we've known about this Ezekiel 39 war, and we know it's kind of like the tail end. It's at the time of the coming of the Lord with heavenly Mount Zion. And that's when this war is going to be. We've taught on this many times, that within the chapters that equal years of tribulation, there's the event talked about prophetically within these chapters is either something that might begin at the start of the year, it could be in the midst of the year, or it could be right at the tail end of the year. Sometimes the description of everything in the chapter is playing out throughout the whole year. Okay? So it's either around the beginning, the middle, the end, or it could be playing out throughout the whole year. So when we were looking at Ezekiel 39, I would always say that it was playing out like towards the very end of the 6th year. And it is. Okay? It is, but we're going to go into it and show it with a greater detail, understanding that it's on a Nisan side, not a Tishri side, and we're going to see how that affects as we go also into other books, showing where these events are then taking place on the Tishri side, because this is the Sabbath year of rest. Okay? So what we're going to see is, of course, there's the war of the Gog war. Okay? Prophesy against Gog. Thou shalt fall upon an open field. This is going to happen around the midst here of the 6th year in Nisan. How do I know? Look at where it lines up. If you take this arrow across, you end up right here at the end of 6 years on the Tishri side. What's at the end of 6 years? Well, we've got Mark chapter 9, verse 2, remember? The after 6 days, which is 6 years in the prophetic, right? The difference from Luke, Mark, Matthew in the Transfiguration story. This is the after 6 days or after 6 years, and it's on a Tishri side. And in chapter 6 of Ezekiel, we have this battle of Gog of Magog. Well, what do we know about this battle of Gog and Magog? It's just below the end of it, like right in here, okay? That's really where it's pointing to. And what do we know about this? Well, we know it's just like the end of the 6th year of seals. What do we see at the end of the 6th year of seals in Revelation chapter 6? They're seeing the Lord come. He is coming with heavenly Mount Zion, the stone, right? The mountain carved without hand that's cast at the image, destroys the image, and becomes a great mountain. This is what they're seeing. We've talked about this number of times over the last couple of years because it is absolutely awesome. And we've been teaching on it for about 6 years. But it's in the last couple to realize what on earth this could possibly look like. It's so freaking out for people that they're hiding in the mountains of rocks and saying to the rocks, fall on them, to hide them from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come. What is this day of his wrath? It's the Ezekiel 39 war. And the Ezekiel 39 war is going to take place in the 6th year of Ezekiel, and it's going to take place right at the end of the 6th year of seals, right in here, which is at the coming of the Lord with heavenly Mount Zion. It's the end of the 6th year of seals right here. Now, what else does it equal? Revelation chapter 17, right? Remember the beast that has 10 horns? They're the 10 kings. It's the same picture as the beast of Daniel chapter 12 with the 10 toes. And the stone comes and crushes it and destroys it. Well, what do we know happens? The 10 horns and the 10 with the 10 that are the 10 kings with the beast, and the Lord comes and makes war with them. He is Lord of lords and King of kings. What does he do? He kills the 10 kings, the 10 toes, and destroys the beast, as you guys know. When we go to Mark 13, what time is this? It's the one right here in Mark's discourse at the end of the 6th year of seals, after that tribulation, when they're going to see the stars of heaven fall and the Son of Man coming in the clouds. This is him coming at this exact same time when he's bringing about the destruction of these enemies. And what do we know happened, as you recall, in the abomination of desolation, in the first half of seals during World War III? Remember, there's no conversation of false prophet or false Christ. It's not until the abomination of desolation at around mid-ish seals that you then get the conversation of false Christ and false prophets now being on the scene. And you'll recall in Matthew's discourse, we know and we proved it out before we got the realization in the Gospels of the discourses that the Lord is going to destroy the 10 kings and the beast, right? And the beast. He's going to be killed at the end of seals. So, according to Revelation 17, he is the one who was, is not, and then what? And then will come out of the pit as the son of perdition, goeth into perdition. You see? So this is the was as he reigns for the 42 months. This is all to the end of the 6th year of seals at the coming of the Lord, when he brings destruction on the 10 horns and the beast, or the 10 toes and the image of the beast, right? And where am I? And let's keep going. I did it again. So we're understanding now where this attack is. We can see why it's in Ezekiel in chapter 39 in relation to the chapters to years, which is the 6th year. Okay? Because in an Ezekiel Nisan to Nisan, it'll be in the midst of the year, which is really in a Tishri to Tishri, right at the end of the 6th year, which lines up with Mark and it being after 6 days or 6 years. But what else does it say? Well, let's not forget verse 9, when it then tells us about burning of the weapons for 7 years. Okay? So now they're going to be burning weapons for 7 years. Here's the end of your 6th year of seals. The Lord has destroyed the enemy in the Gog of Magog war, and now they're going to be burning weapons, it says, for 7 years. Now, a lot of people of the world will tell you, in a very confused fashion, that the Ezekiel 39 war they believe is going to happen at the beginning of tribulation in their 7-year thinking, like we taught in the Gog of Magog teaching. But if it was at the beginning, then why are they burning weapons for 7 years? Hello. So there's no more weapons during the 7 years of tribulation that they have next? Makes no sense. And then other people will teach that the burning of the weapons will be for the 7 years after tribulation, meaning the Gog and Magog war is at the end of tribulation, and then they'll burn weapons for the first 7 years of the peaceful millennial reign while the Lord's ruling and reigning. That didn't make any sense either, right? That's because it can't make sense in a 7-year thinking. You need the 14-year revelation to understand it. So if this is the time of the war and the Lord destroys them, having come, as we know, having come, I thought I had it opened. Watch this. When the Lord comes at this point, remember what I was just saying, it's also connected to Daniel chapter 2. We'll show this probably in another chapter as well when we get to one of the other books. But remember this, in relation to the end of days, it's when the stone was cut without hands, and smote the image upon the feet that are iron and clay and broken in pieces. Well, upon what? The feet and the 10 toes. And the stone became a great mountain. All of this is the end of the 6th year of seals. So he's destroyed the enemy, and now they're going to be burning weapons for 7 years. Well, watch what happens. Here's where that destruction comes, and now they're going to burn weapons for 7 years. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, the Sabbath year is the first one. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So by the end of the 6th year of trumpets, by the end of the 13 years of total tribulation, on a Tishri side, the Ezekiel 39 burning of the weapons for 7 years comes to an end. Well, why does that matter? Well, you guys will recall, we know the book of Joel. We've also got the revelation of the book of Joel that we've done a teaching on. Joel chapter 1, 2, and 3, the coming of the 40 days, the coming of the Son of Man at the beginning, at the end of seals, with heavenly Mount Zion, and then, of course, when he returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives, this is the coming of the Lord here. Well, guess what? What does it say? In Joel chapter 3, of the prophetic picture of the return of the Lord, feet down, coming on the feet down on the Mount of Olives, what does it say? Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. What time is it? It's the time of the winepress, right? The wrath of God. When does the wrath of God happen? Right here, when he then returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives. Where's Joel 3:10? Same place. Why would they be beating their plowshares into swords and pruning hooks into spears when earlier, 7 years earlier, they were burning all their weapons? Because from the burning of all the weapons, the Lord who destroyed them, who came on heavenly Mount Zion with paradise at the end of the 6th year of seals, is here all the way through in one form until something happens at the end of the 13th year of tribulation or at the end of the 6th year of trumpets, and then immediately after, he's going to return feet down on the Mount of Olives. And what's going to happen? There's going to be another war, which is the time of the treading of the grapes. See how that works? See how that works? Two sides working together, but each book having their own year as a sowing and reaping year or a Nisan year start where they will play out. And I'm going to finish this part with Ezekiel to prove out that Ezekiel is in fact Nisan. Okay? Here's another piece in Nisan before we get there, or in Ezekiel. We have Ezekiel 39:12, where they're going to be burying bones for 7 months to cleanse the land in Israel. Well, this burying bones for 7 months is somewhere in this period of time right here. You know, we've got it pointed down here. It might be a little bit higher and go up a little bit further, but this is that time frame of the bearing of the bones for 7 months. Okay? Then what happens? Let's go to the next piece that's really exciting with Ezekiel. And we go to Ezekiel chapter 47. Okay? So we saw in Joel chapter 3:10, not only were they beating their plowshares into swords and pruning hooks into spears, but we saw in Joel chapter 3 that it was also the time for the winepress. Okay? It was the time for the winepress of Almighty God, and that is his second battle. Right? You guys remember the teaching of the two swords. The first sword is the end of 6 years of seals. The other sword, the second sword, is at the end when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives to begin that final 14th year. Well, we go to Revelation 19, and we see the treading of the winepress of the wrath of Almighty God. This comes in the final 14th year of tribulation, exactly in line right here. Right here is where it happens. So you've got Joel. They're going to be beating their plowshares back, into swords and pruning hooks into spears, and it's going to be right on time for this final battle right here in the 14th year of tribulation on the Tishri side. And what do we know this time is right here? The start of the 14th year. Well, it's the Matthew one, right? So remember, we had the Mark one down here. We've got the Matthew one up here, Matthew 17:1, that also says after 6 days, which is a prophetic type of after 6 years. Mark's was for seals, Matthew's is for trumpets. And when you read this in the Transfiguration story, it's a picture of the Lord appearing there with them. Okay? It's a picture of his mid-trib coming and his post-trib coming. This is his post-trib coming feet down on the Mount of Olives, which we will get into in a later chapter a little bit further down the road. So what happens next? Well, we're going to go to Ezekiel 47. And what we're seeing here in Ezekiel 47 is very strange. And as I said in a previous teaching when I was touching on this, this was a very strange place for me to see that Ezekiel 47 was talking about what it was talking about, yet we know that the 14th year is the days of Noah, which is when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, and it's 1 year and 10 days long to the blowing of the shofar to begin the Jubilee. So it was very strange that Ezekiel chapter 47 was lined up with the 14th year in the chapters to years. I knew it had to be. I knew it was in alignment with how these things played out, but it wasn't making complete sense because of what we read in Ezekiel chapter 47. Because what we're reading in Ezekiel chapter 47 is this right here. Starting in verse 1, afterward he brought me again unto the door of the house, okay, of the temple of the Lord, and behold, the waters issued out from under the threshold of the house toward the east, of the house eastward, from the forefront of the house stood toward the east, and the waters came down from the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. What is going on here? This is the Lord renewing the earth from the temple. Why on earth would he be doing this in the midst of the final year as the days of Noah when he's destroying all the enemies? It didn't make any sense to me. Right? There was something that was glitchy here. Okay? Where he's healing the waters, he's curing everything, right? It wasn't making sense. There was something missing in the understanding that this was lined up with the 14th year. This is why I was saying it was such a big deal that the revelation that the Spirit led, the understanding that some books were Tishri books, some books were Nisan books. But the Spirit didn't reveal it until after this believed 70-year passed, and we realized we had one more shot at it, and that Tishri had to start it because it was immovable in its count. Then, boom, it opened up. And this is what I had told you in the previous ones. How did this open up? How could Ezekiel 47 be the 14th year in the chart? There's only one way, and that is on a Nisan count side, because Nisan starts after the Tishri count, right? And what ends up happening? It could be in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the second half of the year, all the way throughout. So which one do you think this one is? It's about the middle to the end is the revelation of Ezekiel 47. How do we know? Look at this. Ezekiel 47 is playing out in the 14th year on the Nisan side from about the middle of the year to the end of it. And how do we know it? If we go right across, look where we are. It's the beginning of the Jubilee. On a Nisan, it is in the 14th chapter, but it cannot be a Tishri 14th year chapter point, because this final 14th year is the days of Noah, when the Lord returns feet down and brings destruction upon all of the enemies, when the plowshares are beaten into swords and the pruning hooks back into spears after the 7 years are done, so that they can battle and destroy all the enemies. And this entire process is 1 year and 10 days, just like the story of Noah is, which is why it's only found in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 24. At the end of Christ's return, at the coming of the Lord, it says. Which means this, and the point of the waters flowing from the temple and him renewing everything, could not have happened in a Tishri 14th year, but only in a Nisan 14 year, if Nisan started after the Tishri count. This is why this is so awesome from here to here, knowing that the count begins here to get us to the start of the 14 here on this side. That there had to be one more year count. This is unbelievably exciting. Because as the 14th year represented in the second half of the 14th year playing out for Ezekiel 47, it's the first half of the Jubilee. It's the first half of the Jubilee where Ezekiel 47 plays out. When he will have destroyed all the enemies, blown the shofar on the 10th day of atonement at the end of 1 year and 10 days. And what will he do from that point? Remember, the earth will then be renewed. And if we go to Isaiah 65, listen to what Isaiah, is it 65? Yes. Isaiah 65, verse 17, what does it tell us? For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. This is not New Jerusalem coming down. This is the renewing. See that? It's the Hebrew word 2319, new fresh thing that comes from the root word to rebuild and repair. He is going to renew the heavens and the earth. It's going to flow out from the temple, just like it says. He's not going to do this in the midst of the final year of destruction, of the treading of the grapes. He's doing this at the beginning of the Jubilee. And how do we know what's taking place? Because remember, people are then going to live to hundreds of years again. There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that has not fulfilled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. They're going to be living hundreds of years again, because it's going to go back to the renewed earth. The promise of the millennial reign that the Jews have been promised, their heaven on earth, which, by the way, is the reason Matthew's gospel is the one that talks about the kingdom of heaven instead of the kingdom of God. It all makes sense when you have the keys. It's awesome. You see? So now it makes sense why Ezekiel 14 has this renewing of the earth taking place from the water flowing from Jerusalem. Because it's right here in the first part of the Jubilee. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? You see, the finer details is what we're getting. Well, what if we go to Ezekiel chapter 48? Watch this. Now these are the names of the tribes, and what are they all given? They're all given their portion of land in Jerusalem that they had been promised, which will be the final promise and their millennial reign. And look at where it is. It's in the 15th year, in the chapters to years. It's in the Jubilee. But guess what? It's got to be in the Jubilee, but in the Jubilee, this is when they come back from where they were in the wilderness, and what happens? This is when they're starting to get their land. This is when things will be returned to them. Well, guess what it tells us in Leviticus 25, verse 13? It says, in the year of the Jubilee, return every man. In the year of the Jubilee. When it's the start of a year. When it's in, you have to determine which year it's in. Well, this is talking about the Jubilee. In the Jubilee. Which means what? Here was the renewing of the earth, just like Ezekiel had in 47, the 14th chapter of the year, the first portion of Jubilee. And in, which means around the middle of it, here we are starting the 15th year, the 15th chapter in Ezekiel, chapter 48 as the 15th year. And what is the answer? In the midst of the Jubilee, it's when they all come back into the land having received their promised land. And that's exactly what we're told is happening in Ezekiel 48. Boom. How awesome is that? How awesome is that? How did we even figure out this count? How do we even know this count? Well, for one, we started by understanding that there were 14 years at the end of days and then the Jubilee, which is the 15th year. Or in the bigger picture, it's 21 years, and this would be the 22nd. 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. 22 books in Revelation. Right? And what we did is we tracked it back to the time of Christ. But we didn't have all the details, and throughout these years, we thought we had it, and we thought we had it. But we needed more clarity on what? We needed to understand more clarity in Leviticus. We had to understand how to count the 70 years. We had to understand that the count wasn't from the land that he gave to them, which is Israel, that the count was from Jerusalem, and we had to understand when they had Jerusalem as their capital. And then we had to find out the history of Christ. We had to track the 15th year of Tiberius, see what the history record said. Find out when he declared the Jubilee. And once we understood the Jubilee with Jerusalem and are in this final year, we understood this could not be moved. You cannot move the historical record, the counts from his birth, the signs in the sun, moon, and stars, the decrees of Scripture meant there was no way that we were going to be able to move this. And it turned out, the revelation, the Spirit led us to reveal we wouldn't have to. We needed the final year. So exciting. So exciting. So now you can understand unequivocally, Ezekiel is a Nisan counting of years. Now, we're going to go to our brother John in green, who is a Tishri count, and watch how this plays out. Here we are. We're on the John one now. The inserted reference ones are in black, and of course the John is all in green. So here we are. We are in John's Gospel we're going to look at. And chapter 1 is the picture of what? Chapter 8, right? It's the new year of a cycle of 7. But to John's Gospel, instead of 7 chapters and then 7 chapters, 7 chapters, 1 through 7, 1 through 7, 1 through 7, you've got 21 chapters in the Gospel of John. And it all begins in chapter 8. This is something that for many years we scratched our heads on. I know I did, trying to figure out the end of 7 going into 8, because it seemed like it had to be the end of 7 to get to 8. But yet the evidence of the conversation in John chapter 8 is the pre-trib, the bridal wedding, and the coming of the Son of Man to begin his 40 days. So what was that doing in chapter 8? It wasn't fully flowing and making sense to us until you realize John is Tishri to Tishri year counts. And then boom, it starts to open up. So let's go into John chapter 8. And you guys know this. John chapter 8, verse 1 and 2, something we've known for a long time, is the same wording from the pre-trib in Luke chapter 21. I got so many colors on that one, it always takes me so long to open it. Chapter 21, verse 34 through 36, you know, this is the pre-trib verse, right? Verse 36, watch ye therefore and pray always that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. And then what does it say? And he went in the daytime and he abode in the mount called Olives, and all the people came to him early in the morning. Okay? That's it right there. That is your pre-trib verse or group of verses. And what do we get in John chapter 1 John chapter 8 verse 1 and 2? The same conversation. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again to the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And then it says, and the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. Now, we've talked on this many times. This woman taken in adultery is a typology of a Gentile. Okay? We've gone to it many times over the years. When you go to the book of Ruth and you read about Ruth, she says, why have you accepted me, this stranger? And the word stranger is also, one of the definitions is adulteress. Okay? She's a Gentile woman. The pre-trib is the Gentile bride. And so what are we seeing here? We're seeing a pre-trib conversation and the bride standing before the Lord. When they want to stone her, there he is standing before her. It's a picture of the 7-day wedding, the pre-trib. And then they all leave, and Jesus is bent over on a knee, writing on the ground, and the woman is the only one standing before him, almost like he's on his knee proposing to her. Okay? This is the pre-trib story. This is the picture of the pre-trib and the wedding. And then look what we get. John 8, verse 12. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And what do we know this is, brothers and sisters? Oh, you betcha you know where I'm going with this. This is the revelation that we know from Isaiah. This is the light vexation, the light attack that happens right after the pre-trib. And there's the 7-day wedding. There's an attack on Haifa and Tel Aviv. And then it will settle. It'll last about a week. And then who comes? The one who walks to shine the light in the darkness. This is a picture of the Son of Man coming to begin his 40 days. Well, that's John chapter 8, verse 12. We're like several verses into the Gospel of John at this point. Well, lo and behold, if we go to the chart and we understand that Tishri starts first, just as our count starts from Tishri in the mirror, that gets us to the revelation of the timing of this, to start the 14 years on the year side from the end of 70. Here we are. That means the conversation of the pre-trib and the 40 days of the Son of Man beginning when he is the light shining in the darkness after the wedding conversation should be taking place where? In John chapter 8. It's supposed to be taking place in John chapter 8. Do you get it? It's supposed to, because the 50 days, this above portion with the pre-trib, which is why there's a conversation of the pre-trib verse, and then there's a conversation of him with a woman, which is like a Gentile bride in his presence, and then him starting his 40 days as the Son of Man shining his light in the darkness. It's over here. It hasn't started yet, but it's going to play out over here in what would be John chapter 8, exactly in the right spot. But only if we understood John counts Tishri to Tishri. That is awesome. That is awesome. You see, this equals John chapter 8 right here. 1 through 12 right here. Right in line with right here. And what else does it line up with? Well, what we talked on in a previous teaching, right? When I touched on these things. It also now makes sense with Luke chapter 9. We saw in the previous one that I did over here how Mark and Matthew, the after 6 days, 6 years in each of them, where are they aligned to? Well, what about Luke? Luke's about in 8 days is also a typology of 8 years. And for the longest time, when we thought it was opposite, that Nisan came before Tishri, it would have actually had us in the 7th year. So we would have had one being 8 days when the Son of Man comes, which is when the Son of Man comes on the 8th day, which would be aligned in the same spot as John here, chapter 8. And it's also what? In the 8th year, which means it's also counting on a Tishri side. Ding, ding, ding. Did you get it? Did you catch it? That means the transfigurations are counting on what? You guessed it, a Tishri side. Because the 8th day is starting in the 8th or the first year of the 14. But what is it? It's also a picture of the 8th year, like John chapter 8 in the big picture of 21, right? So it's in the 8th year or the first year on a Tishri count side. And it's also the Son of Man coming after the wedding on the 8th day, right here, when he's coming on the 8th day, like we showed for years in Luke's transfiguration story. But now we can understand that it also means at some point in that 8th year, about an 8th year, in that time of the 8th year. And guess what? There it is. Smack dab in line with John chapter 8, revealing that it would take place in a Tishri count, which is why when you now look back at the previous one we did, excuse me, with Ezekiel, excuse me, it ends with Mark's right here, remember? Mark 9, verse 2, after 6 days, 6 years. And when we get to Matthew's, Matthew 17:1, after 6 days, 6 years. Now you're seeing Luke's in order telling us that the transfiguration counts are a Tishri to Tishri count. This is why I believe that there's a possibility, as I said earlier, that Revelation 12:1 in this period of time right here of 2025, with all of these years and these counts now lining up all the way from Christ to the end, I believe we may very well see something, because you get what's happening here, right? There is, the 14 years isn't officially starting at the fall of 2025. It doesn't start till the end of 70. But there is a spiritual sense of something happening here, because this is connected to the count of the end. And how do we know it? Because we have to be in the 8th year as John chapter 8. We have to be in the 8th year. We have to be in John chapter 8 and the pre-trib, the bride, the 40 days of the Son of Man starting in this time. Hello. So we will be all eyes, man. If something happens at the time of Tishri of 2025, we will. Could you imagine, guys? Could you imagine having spoken this now and being aware that Revelation 12:1 comes before the pre-trib, and we know that the Tishri count begins before the Nisan and everything's in order? Could you imagine something starting there? It won't literally be the end of days, but you want to talk about a preparation warning, seeing something that makes people say, oh my goodness, what is that? This would be the time. That gets me giddy, man. That gets me giddy. It's so wild. It's so wild. All right, let's keep going. Let's go into John chapter 10. What do we know about John chapter 10? John chapter 10, let's go to our chapters to years. John chapter 10, in a Tishri to Tishri, is that midish tribulate, that, we always say about 2.5 years. Well, in a Tishri side of things, it's really only going to be about 2 years. Right? Watch, here's what I mean. You see, if the Tishri side of 14 begins 6 months before tribulation officially starts, whether we get an event in the sky that we see here or not, the Tishri count starts before the 14 years really takes off. But this Tishri count has begun. You see, it's like this is the was. When they started with sowing and reaping before Exodus 12, when the Lord told them now it starts at Nisan, at month 1. So there's an event, there's things happening here in preparation for all of this that's then going to start at Nisan. So even though the 14 years after the above, after the 50 days, the 14 years begins the 14 years right here at Nisan, if we count this up, we're only what? 2 years in. We're only 2 years in on a year count side, but how far would we be in on this side? 1, 2.5. You see? Because John counts from Tishri. So if John counts from Tishri and it starts 6 months before the official tribulation begins, then guess what? It will appear as if it was 2 years, but in reality on a Tishri side, it was 2.5 years, as we've been teaching the whole time. You get it? We've been teaching this the whole time because sometimes we were teaching from Tishri over the years, and sometimes we were doing the teaching from a Nisan over the years. And then we finally realized in recent months that it was unequivocally going to be a Nisan official start with the above that comes first. And then the Spirit reveals there's a dual, a double, there's both playing out. So what would appear to be after 2 years is really going to be 2.5 years. See, 1, 2, in the third year is a half year in. And what happens in John chapter 12? Well, let's go look at John chapter 12. One we know very well, right? Jesus is the true shepherd. Anyone who comes by any other way except by the door is the false shepherd, right? Like the Antichrist, the false Christ, the beast. And what do we know about it? He's described right here in John chapter 10, verse 12. But he that is a hireling and not the shepherd, whose own sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaves the sheep, and flees, and the wolf catches them, and scatters the sheep. Why is this important? Why does this, whoops, where did I go? Give me a second. Why is this important? Because this is the time of the Antichrist. This is when the beast shows up on the scene. This is when the scattering takes place. This is Revelation chapter 2, the church of Pergamum, when the beast gets his power. Okay, this is when the beast and the false prophet show up. This is why, even in Genesis chapter 10, remember chapters to years, Genesis also lines up with the first 21 chapters like John, giving us different detail but laying out the same story. See, chapter 10 to chapter 10, What do we get in chapter 10 of Genesis? We have the story of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel being built up. Okay? At the beginning of his kingdom with Nimrod, the Antichrist, the beast type, in the exact same chapter to year reference of when the wolf is coming to scatter who? The sheep. Right? The first group going are the lambs, and a group of lambs are remaining to stay and work, and they're going to help bring in the sheep. The sheep, which is the house of Israel, the Gentiles grafted in with the house of Israel and the house of Israel itself. And then you've got, what does Jesus say? Other sheep I have that are not of this fold. Right? Therefore doth my Father love me, because I'm going to bring these sheep in too. And it just so happened, John chapter 21 said, feed my lamb, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. We know who the lambs are. We know that the first sheep after the lambs is the house of Israel and the Gentiles grafted in. And the other sheep that he has that aren't of this fold that are being scattered here are the house of Judah. So amazing, right? Incredible. This right here is the same as Revelation chapter 13. In Revelation chapter 13, the beast now has power over the three beasts that came first, right? Over the lion, the bear, and the leopard. He now has the combination of all their powers. And what does he get? Now power is given unto him to continue for 42 months. Okay? He's now got power to continue for 42 months. Oh, come on. I'm not lifting my chunker finger up high enough. Okay? So here we are. We're in the third year, about 2.5 years into it all, about 2 years of World War III, and then the beast comes, and he's already going to be here on the scene in some fashion, but the beast won't officially be the beast as we know it until this point here. How do we know? Remember I just showed you, we talked about it in Mark chapter 13 compared to Matthew chapter 24. You see, in the first half of seals, or that first portion of seals, there's no mention in Mark's discourse of the beast. Okay? Let's go back over here. I got it over here somewhere, right here. Okay? In Mark's discourse, which is the first 2 to 2.5 years of tribulation of seals, there's no mention of a beast or false prophet until the abomination of desolation, and then you've got the false Christ, false prophet showing up. We know that the false Christ, the beast, is killed at the end of seals, but not the false prophet. And that's why when we get to Matthew 24, in the first half of Matthew 24, the false prophet is there, but not the beast. And then you get the abomination of desolation, and then you've got what? Well, then you've got the beast come back, because he's going to was, is not, and then shall be. He's coming up from the pit, and now you've got the beast and the false prophet there again. Okay? So these are the things we can understand. We know what's going on here. So he's getting his 42 months to now continue. Now it's when he's got the authority. Well, this is when it starts right here. In the spring, right? Huh. Funny how that works, isn't it? Funny how that works. That the fleeing would be at about what? At about the time of Passover? At about the time of Passover, they're going to flee into the wilderness. What fleeing are we talking about? The Mark 13 one. You're going to have the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not from Mark's discourse. This is all about the mark of the beast, the image of the beast, right? Which is Revelation 13 that we're talking about. When he gets this power, and for 42 months, what's he going to do? Go make war with the saints and overcome them. And it's the time of the mark of the beast that they won't be able to buy or sell. So what we're seeing in Mark 13 is, of course, not the temple rebuilt, but the temple of men, because we're still in the Gentile age till the end of seals. So it's the defilement of the temple of flesh, which is the mark of the beast during seals. Standing where it ought not, in the definition, could also mean placed where it ought not. Okay? The temple hasn't been built during seals. Only the foundation is going to be built during seals. Again, things we've taught on a number of times. So the beast is now going to have 42 months from this point forward. It'll seem like it was only 2 years, but it's on a John side. Hello. It's actually about 2.5 years in, because he counts from a Tishri to Tishri side. And what's he going to get? 1, 2, 3, in about a half right here. 42 months is over. 42 months is over. So here it is. Okay. We see John chapter 10, verse 12. The wolf comes and scatters the sheep. It's Revelation 13:22, when the false Christ and false prophets come. It's the abomination of desolation of the mark of the beast. It's when they're now going to flee into the wilderness, which is why in Pergamum you've got the mention of that Old Testament king and prophet, right, with Balaam and Balak, which is a picture of the false Christ and the false prophet, right, the Antichrist and the false prophet. And then what does it say in Pergamum at that time? It said that, what's the Lord going to do? Oh man, it's so awesome. This is probably going to be a little bit longer teaching. I know some of you guys love it. Others that don't, well, watch it in parts. Because, man, I can go in a million different directions throughout this whole thing. Okay? Here's Pergamum. This is the point when the beast and the false prophet show up, represented as Balaam and Balak. We know that, what did it say about the wolf? That he would scatter them, right? So if he's going to scatter them, and they're going to be living in the wilderness, what's the Lord going to do? He's going to provide manna, as he did for Moses and them in the wilderness. Hello. See how awesome that is? Okay? So they're now going to flee. It's Mark's discourse. They're fleeing into the wilderness at this point. It's the time of the mark of the beast, and the beast gets 42 months. When the 42 months is over, it's the end of the 6th year on this side, which is the same alignment where we showed this with the 6th chapter, or the 6th year, in relation to Ezekiel 39, when the Ezekiel 39 war would take, and then they would burn the weapons for what? 7 years. It's the same end as Revelation 13, 42 months coming to an end when the Lord comes with heavenly Mount Zion, and is the Revelation 17 war, when he destroys the 10 tones, or the 10 horns, and the beast. Isn't that awesome? It's so awesome. It blows my mind how awesome it is to continue to understand. Okay? This is what we were saying earlier, right? This is the whole system of the beast and him taking power over everything. And then he's that great mountain that comes and crushes them all. And it becomes a great mountain. Why is it a great mountain? Well, let's have a look to see what the Lord said next. John chapter 14. John chapter 14. What would John chapter 14 be? John chapter 14 would be right here. Okay? So at some point in this 7th year. In this 7th year would be John right here, chapter 14. So at some point in this 7th year of seals, what's he going to do? Well, we just saw him coming at the end. Right? We just saw him coming at the end of 6 years of seals with this stone carved without hand that became a great mountain, and he's going to be starting to receive people to it. That won't happen here in the 6th year, because he's destroying all the enemies. Now in the 7th year, which is chapter 14, is when this is going to begin. Well, what is this mountain that he's come with? It's, of course, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Remember this? The man in Christ above 14 years ago. It's going to be like a rapture going to the third heaven. This is the pre-trib. That's what we were talking about earlier, right at the beginning, the above 50 days part. And then there's such a man, not really in Christ like the first one, but believes in Christ. And it's what? This is the great multitude rapture. This is the was caught up. What is the was caught up? They're going to paradise. They're going to paradise, which is the Garden of Eden. Which means in the 7th year of seals, in John chapter 14, in a Tishri to Tishri count, in here, what's going to be happening? Well, if we go to John chapter 14, let's read what he says. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. Remember, this whole thing with preparing is only found in Mark's gospel at the Passover meal, at the story, right? In the Luke, Mark, Matthew one, the word prepare, furnished and prepared, is only in Mark's, because that's where it's supposed to be. What does he say? I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, listen carefully, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Has that happened yet? Nope. Is it going to happen? Of course it is. When he smites the image, remember, it's for the latter days in Daniel chapter 2. It's for the latter days when he comes and smashes it to pieces and the stone becomes a great mountain. What is this great mountain? He's coming with paradise. He's coming with paradise. He's coming with Eden. This is why at the end of Revelation chapter 6, everybody's freaking out seeing this mountain coming down. Could you imagine? Is it some sort of ship-looking mountain? Everybody's going to see it. It's crazy. And it's in the chapter to year, John chapter 14, which according to the sowing and reaping side has to be at some point in the 7th year. Well, do you know that's exactly where it's supposed to be? Watch this. You guys remember Deuteronomy 16? You see how this flows? Brothers and sisters, you guys know this isn't me. I am a mouthpiece. I'm just a mouthpiece. This has been Spirit-led since 7.5, 8 years ago. We try as men and women in the flesh to try to figure out, Lord, when. But the revelation is fully Spirit. Remember, Deuteronomy 16 is the revelation of the end of days. Remember that? The 7 days of unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks. But remember, the Feast of Weeks is going to be the whole count that happens 4 months earlier, all of that, right? And then it's the 7 days of the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. And what does the Feast of Tabernacles have? 7 days and then the 8th day. What is the tribulation? It's 6 years of seals, like the 6 days of unleavened bread. And then what does it say? The 7th day is the solemn assembly. And then what do you have? Then you have 7 days of tabernacles, which is like the 7 years of trumpet judgments. And then you have the 8th day of tabernacles, which is the solemn assembly. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that incredible? So why am I saying it's so incredible in relation to this with John? Because it's 6 days of unleavened bread. 6 days as 6 years of unleavened bread. And what do we know it's called? It's called the bread of, where is it? Oh, further up. It's called the bread of affliction. And how long does it play out? Well, it doesn't play out like tabernacles. It plays out 6 days as 6 years, and the 7th day is the solemn assembly. What's the 7th day? It's the 7th year. The 7th year is the solemn assembly. And in John chapter 14, the Lord said he was going to receive them unto himself, that he was leaving to go and prepare a place for them in paradise, and that when he returns at the end of the 6th year of seals, in that 7th year of rest, he's going to receive them unto himself with paradise in the exact same chapter to year he said he would do it. It's so awesome. It's one of my favorites. I know I say I've got many favorites, but I do. This one is just a crystal clear awesome one. And now that you can understand it in its proper place from a Tishri count, you understand right in here is where that great multitude rapture is going to happen. Remember what it said in Mark as well? If we go to Mark's transfiguration story, remember Mark's is a past tense. In Luke's, it's not past tense. The next thing they're going to see in Luke's transfiguration, the words before the transfiguration, in Luke 9:27, they're going to see the kingdom of God. But what do we get in Mark's? It's past tense. Okay? Some standing here shall not taste of death, right? Some won't be killed, but will be going in the great multitude mid-trib rapture. Some will have died. The majority will still be alive. Okay? Having fled into those places of protection in the wilderness. It says what? Till they have seen, past tense, the kingdom of God come with power. Why is it past tense? Because they will have seen him come with power at the end of the 6th year, and everybody's freaking out at the end of the 6th seal, but they don't know when they're going, remember? They don't know when they're going. Well, what ends up happening? The Lord came here. They're going to be going in sometime in the 7th year, the great multitude rapture, which I believe is going to be connected either to first or second Passover, right in here, as we've taught on in the past. It'll be around first or second Passover, and guess what? That would be the end of the 6 years on the Nisan side. That would be the end of the 6 years on the Nisan side. So the Lord came here, the 144,000 sealed, the great multitude rapture comes in when he receives them unto himself, when he came with heavenly Mount Zion. But what did he have to do? He had to destroy the enemies. Everybody's freaking out seeing this mountain coming down, destroys all the enemies, kills the beast, the 10 horns, 10 toes, seals the 144,000. Then they help the workers from seals bring in the great multitude, and they're going to where? They're going to paradise, Eden, the place he came back with, that he had prepared for them, and he's going to receive them there. That's probably going to be at around Passover, second Passover, in the 7th year of seals. Why do I think it's going to be Passover, second Passover? Well, we just saw it, right? Theirs is connected to unleavened bread. Theirs is connected to unleavened bread. But don't forget there's something else going on, right? Remember, they're going to be burying bones for 7 months? Hello. If they're going to be burying bones from the end here to right up in here, you see, remember chapter 6 of Ezekiel, or the 6th year to Ezekiel 39? And they're going to be burying bones in here for 7 months? Well, if it's 6 months difference from here to here, and 1 more month is to second Passover, then what are the chances that the great multitude rapture actually happens at second Passover? 7 months later. They were unclean because they were near dead bodies, right? And Israel has to get cleaned up. 7 months to cleanse the land. I'm not saying all of the great multitude is going back into the land, so they have to worry about that. It'll probably be Israel, right? Some of the house of Israel cleaning it. And the total time from here until right here, in the midst of right here, it'd be the end of the 7th year of Nisan here, and it'll be the midst of the Tishri side, starting for trumpets. You have a year and a half. And this was something, remember, we touched on in a previous teaching a while back, that it looks like from here to here, we have 1.5 years. And we know that in total, it will take some, not all of them, but it will take in total, according to 2nd Esdras, 1.5 years to get all back and to be all established back in the land. Now, of course, some will be there earlier. And I'm not talking about the great multitude rapture. We know the great multitude rapture will happen somewhere in this point right here. But before all of Israel makes their way back, and Judah, we're looking at probably that same year and a half. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because of what we see coming, and I think I'll probably get to it more in Ezekiel, so you're going to want to remember it. Because, you see, on the Nisan side, we're still in the 7th year until the midst of the 1st year of trumpets. Okay? You're going to see when we get into the Zechariah one that the count still begins from here. But there's something happening in the first half before all of the rebuilding takes place. It's commissioned and it's going to get started, but there's still something else happening at the end of the 7th on a Nisan side. Okay? You'll see when we get there. It's pretty wild. So now we can see we've got Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, which is, behold, the great multitude. Now, the great multitude of the mid-trib great multitude rapture, we know is happening in the 7th day, 7th year. So it's not a mystery that it's happening here. It's connected to Passover and unleavened bread. So it's not a mystery as to whether it's happening at maybe first or second Passover time frame. Okay? And we know from the book of Revelation that it's after the first 6 seals and before the 7th seal. So that's not a mystery in the fact that we have it here. We can now just see it and understand it with more clarity and tracking it with John. Now, watch what happens. Now we go to John chapter 8. John chapter 15. And in John chapter 15, we get right off the bat, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Remember what this conversation is? This is the conversation of the 144,000, right? They need to now start bearing fruit. If they don't bear fruit, they'll be cut off and all this stuff. So we've talked about all this. Now the Lord is there. The Lord is there. He is on heavenly Mount Zion. He's established in Jerusalem. So I put it in the middle right here. Okay? It might be that John 15:1, we can point right here to the beginning of trumpets. Okay? That still is quite probable. And maybe if Tammy, I know she'll be listening, we can maybe line that up here to John 15:1 to the beginning, this line right here, the beginning of the 8th year. The reason I put it here, it didn't really matter, but it's in this range. But we're seeing it's the beginning of things taking place here. Now, why does this matter? It's the same thing we see when we get to Zechariah chapter 8. Okay? It's that the conversation is different, because the conversation, which is the purpose of the revelation of these different things going on in the context of all of these chapters to years. Okay? In all of these chapters to years, we're given something here and something here and something here and something here. It's not all of the exact same thing going on. It's understanding the context of different events and giving us more clarity of all of these things taking place throughout that year. So you're not going to have the exact same detail of information. Well, it's the same thing. If we go to John chapter 15, this conversation in John chapter 15, who's he talking to? We know that this conversation is to the 144,000. This is the conversation of the 144,000. Those who are going to go out and work, which represents the 144,000 going out during trumpets that are about set to go out. That's the conversation being had in John chapter 15. Okay? No greater love for his brother. You are my friends. They're his servants. We know he's talking to the 144,000. So it may very well be that we should point this then, Tammy, right here to the beginning of the 8th year. But when we get into Zechariah, we're going to see something that also points here, but it appears to take place during the first half of the year before the official building of the new temple starts, which you're going to see then will make sense as to from right here, the end of the 6th to the midst of the first year of the 8th is that year and a half before all of the rebuilding will take place. But when the Lord will be there and give them instruction and do all those things, it will start from the beginning right here of the 8th year of Tishri. So this is what we're seeing in John chapter 15. It's the conversation with the 144,000 where the Lord is blessing them. He's strengthening them. He's letting them know now is when you go out and produce. Anybody who doesn't produce is going to be cut off. Okay? And we know there's something that happens with that too, right? So now we keep following John's gospel and we go to John chapter 20. John chapter 20, as you guys know, something happens that we don't like to talk about out loud too often, but we know about verse chapter 9. Okay? For as yet they knew not the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Okay? Well, when does this rising from the dead take place in relation to John chapters to years? Well, if we go to the chapters to years of John, John chapter 20 is right here. So wherever this event takes place, is it the beginning, the middle, the end, all the way throughout? No, it's right at the end of it. How do we know it's at the end of it? All we have to do is go to Scripture. Here we go. Right? For as yet they knew not that he must rise again from the dead. It's right at the end of this 13th year of tribulation, or at the end of the 6th year of trumpets. It's not past this. It's right at the end. And how do we know this is at the end? Well, we go to Revelation chapter 11. Right? We have the two witnesses, 3 days and a half. Remember, he had to be as Jonah was, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. He hasn't fulfilled that yet. It's 3 days and 3 nights, not part of one, not part of another, but 3 days and 3 nights, which means he's going to resurrect on the 4th day. That is 3.5 days. We know the representation of Joshua the high priest, which we'll get into with Ezekiel, and Zerubbabel, who is the Davidic line, and we know one is overseeing the rebuilding of the temple in trumpets time, and one is the high priest and king Joshua, Yeshua Jesus, who is there during trumpets as what? As the ox, right? As Taurus. We all know what that means. He's going to be as Taurus. He's coming for 40 days as the Son of Man, as Reuben, the man of water, the pitcher of water. When he comes on heavenly Mount Zion, he's coming as Messiah ben Joseph, or Messiah ben Ephraim, the ox. And he's here until the end of trumpets. And at the end of trumpets, something is going to happen to the ox. But we know this thing that's going to happen to the ox is based on the priestly line. You see, we all know that when Christ came, it was 2 young pigeons, 2 young turtle doves, okay, for his birth. He was in Leviticus chapter 1. In reverse, he is was the sacrificial lamb without blemish. But there's one more sacrifice, which is the bullock, the ox, for the priests. The atonement for the priests. This is what is still going to be playing out. And this atonement for the priests, what did we just read in John chapter 15, when the Lord says he is the true vine, the Father is the husbandman, and every branch must bear fruit, or it's going to end up being cut off and cast into the fire. You see that? Because what's going to happen? This is another priestly line, right? We know something's going to happen to some of them. And there's going to have to be a saving them, because they cannot be lost. They're already sealed with the Father's name on their foreheads. They can't be lost. So we know there is still a sacrifice. Well, when we go to Revelation chapter 11, and we know what it represents, and we see that after 3 days and 3 nights, and then what happens? And they stood upon their feet, and everybody freaked out, and boom, they went up to heaven. And there was a great earthquake. In the same hour, there was a great earthquake, right? 7,000 men, 7,000 slain of the remnant were afraid and gave glory to the God of heaven. And what happens? Within that same hour, the end of 13 years of tribulation is over. The 6th trumpet is over. Okay? Is over right here. Well, what did John chapter 20 say? That he must rise again from the dead. It has to happen in that final 14th year, or 13th year. Well, that's exactly where it happens, right? It'll be right at the end of the chapter to year for the 20th, when the again will take place. And then what do we know? Immediately, it says, right? In Matthew chapter 24, it ends up telling us that immediately after the tribulation of those days, let's go to Matthew 24 real quick. Because when this happens and they stand up and they go into heaven, the Lord will be returning this time, feet down on the Mount of Olives, immediately as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And this is why we read in Matthew chapter 24, at the coming of the Son of Man, this time, it doesn't say after that tribulation, which Mark said, which is the end of the 6 years of seals. It says immediately after the tribulation of those days. This is when he's going to appear as lightning from one end unto the other. Okay? So we know what's taking place here. And according to John 20, it has to happen in the 13th year, or in the big picture 20th year, right? 13 plus the 7 easy. And then what happens? Well, let's go have a look. We go to John chapter 21. That means John chapter 21 is connected to the final 14th year of tribulation. John chapter on the Tishri side. And John 21 in the final 14th year of tribulation on this side right here has to equal the final 14th year while the Lord is here. That days of Noah that we talked about. Okay? Right at some point in it, which appears to be right near the end of it, we have John chapter 21, and the story in John chapter 21 tells us about what? Casting the net to the right side, and they cast their net, and were not able to draw for the multitude of fish. And what's it the story of? It's the story being full of great fishes, 153 fish. For those of you who haven't seen that teaching, excuse me, I don't remember how far back it is, but if you want to see a wild teaching that tells you who that tells you who these fish represent, you'll want to go back and watch it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I'm just going to point it out to you. Right here. The 153 fish. It'll blow you away. But once you understand who it is, it's crazy. Because you will understand that these 153 fish that are being resurrected, what they represent in the timing of their resurrection is the exact same people that we know from Revelation chapter 20 that are from the church of Smyrna, the Luke remnant who put their necks on the line, not having taken the mark of the beast or the number of the name or worship the beast, who died having been beheaded for the Lord, will be resurrected, and they will be those who will rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. And that's this group right here. Whoops. I went too far. That's this group right here that we've talked about many times. Oh, I thought I had it. Where'd that chapter go? Which is, I'll bring it up over here. Revelation chapter 20 is the story of the 153 fish right here. Those who will take part in the first resurrection, who will reign with Christ as priests and kings for 1,000 years. They take part in the first resurrection. On such, the second death has no part. You guys know who they are. They are the church of Smyrna, the remnant that were chosen by the Lord, the lambs like little Jesuses, little rocks, little lights, who will put their necks on the line, working during the tribulation for the Lord, put in prison, some to death, and they will not be hurt by the second death. They are the remnant who will be resurrected to rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years, and that is directly connected to John chapter 21. Awesome. John in order in a Tishri count is here. We've got it. We've got it. And just as Ezekiel was so incredibly powerful for us on this side by revealing Nisan, John, in being the 8th chapter with the discussion of the pre-trib and the coming of the Son of Man, was equally as important for us to realize that clearly one is a Nisan count and clearly another is a Tishri count, and John's is the one that solidifies for us that Tishri must begin its new Sabbath year's count of year 1 before the 70 years of Nisan is over. And Ezekiel was the one that proved the timing of it being after a Tishri start by the fact that 14th was the timing of the water flowing out, which had to be in the first part of the Jubilee. Brothers and sisters, if you're tracking this, you should be excited. Oh, I'm like you. I'm not excited to wait an extra several months that we're waiting for. But you can remember this teaching in the back of your mind until that point, because this is all in order. And the open books that we've known for years are now being given to us with a greater clarity than we've ever had before. Proving in John and Ezekiel that Tishri has to come before Nisan. And it must fall in a year one. Do you understand that? Did you catch that in all of this as well? It had to be a year one as the 8th day, 8th year for John chapter 8 and the chapters to years. It is the evidence that we can't go one more year. This is an immovable chart. We can't go one more year. We'd be in year 2. We can't go one more year. There is no additional count after the 5th in the count. We can't go to one more year. In neither case does it exist where the count can go 1 year further. And in the revelation of this, it proves it couldn't have been 1 year sooner. In fact, it proves it all the way, like we were saying, all the way to when they came into the land. Because when they came into the land, it just so happened in the count all the way from Christ that when they came into the land, it was a year 0 or a Sabbath year of rest. And that when they come into the land, they would start sowing and reaping that year because it would start the counts, just like he said to do, just like the Lord said to do in Leviticus 25 for them. And it would be 6 years that would bring them right to here. And then it would be sowing and no sowing, no reaping. We followed that all the way through. And this follow came all the way from the count of Christ. All the way from the count of Christ. 1 year further, not possible on Nisan nor Tishri. Do you understand how powerful it is on the Nisan side that it can't? Because of Ezekiel? Do you understand how it does? You can't do it. It doesn't work. Do you understand how important it is on the John side in a Tishri count? That it has to be chapter 8 to 7, 8 as the beginning of the 14 and a Tishri starting first? It can't be 7. It can't be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Do you see that now? This should fire you up like nothing else in a long, long time. Do you understand the depth, the craziness of these revelations? Do you understand the layers deep we have gone that the Spirit has given us to get this far? Do you understand how crazy it would sound to the outside world that we've lined up both calendars and that there are chapters to years within so many of these books, and that we get another layer proving that one is a Nisan and one is a Tishri, proving that Tishri has to come before Nisan, which reveals creation because it was Tishri before Nisan in Exodus? The layer and the depth and the crazy honest of it all is, it's impossible for a human to do it. Like I said, I am simply the mouthpiece. This is the Father. I was talking to our brother Olu the other day, and this doesn't apply just to me. This applies to everybody that hears and understands what we're talking about. And I don't mean have to understand every detail as I do. I'm talking about those who have been given the keys to understand the Gospels and are starting to understand these things throughout the other books and throughout the Scriptures. You know what that means? That means in the heavenly council, God the Father had to instruct the Holy Ghost to say, you, go give it to him, go give it to her. Give it to her, give it to him, give it to that group over there. Do you understand? There's no way to understand this unless the Father gave it to the Spirit to give to you to understand. Just like to me. I was just given the key to open it for everybody. And then take the layers deeper to keep drawing us in closer and keep preparing us. It's awesome. I mean, this is a completely another level. I don't even know what level deep we're into these things now. It's just awesome. All right. Now, we're going to bring it to a close, not right away, but we're going to go now into Zechariah and see how Zechariah has laid these things out for us. Watch this. Zechariah is very interesting because Zechariah is a Tishri count. And as I said earlier in the beginning, it sounds strange, doesn't it? Why would why would Zechariah be a Tishri count when Zechariah tells us about the 70 years? It's so awesome. You see, because once it started with Ezekiel and then John instantly made sense for chapter 8. And then as I started pondering these things, I instantly came to thought was what Zechariah chapter 1 tells us and how it's laid out. Zechariah chapter 1 and how Zechariah chapter 1 is laid out has something, it was like in Ezekiel. It was similar to a John, but more like in Ezekiel. There was something in it that was deeper that I knew was there that I couldn't quite get. Because if you'll recognize this, the 70 years are being talked about in the current, meaning the 70th year. These 70 years being in the 70th year, right near the end of it. And if it's talking about years and it's giving us names of months, we know it's a year count, meaning it's on the Nisan side. But look at where we are. We're like halfway through the chapter before the end of 70 years comes and the forwarding of the affliction takes place. We're like halfway through the chapter. That's not from the beginning of the chapter, like John shows. We're like halfway through it here. So I've often wondered, you see, if it's 14 chapters to 14 years, and we're still these 70 years halfway through the chapter, then it's almost like there's 13 and a half years. Right? If you're going from a Nisan to Nisan, and it's these 70 years coming to an end, then you're really like 13 and a half chapters, not 14 fully. And because I had that in the back of my mind for years, when this came up and I realized there was a difference between these different books, I suddenly remembered Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1 tells us in the 8th month. So, lo and behold, we get a conversation starting in one of our chapters to years books of Zechariah talking to us about starting in the 8th month. Well, what's the 8th month? That's the sowing and reaping time. Oh, it's not exactly the 7th month, but it's in the time of sowing. It's starting in the time of sowing, and in verse 12 then tells us these 70 years, which means it's just before the end of 70 years. Well, how do we know it's just before the end of 70 years? Well, in verse 7, it says it's the 24th day of the 11th month. You see, it's not going into the detail of the events of the pre-trib and the 50 days. It's giving us the details of Jerusalem to 70 years, and then, of course, what takes place in relation to Judah, right? And the Jews, which is what Zechariah is for. So we're at the 24th day of the 11th month, which means there's only about a month and a week left. And what does it say? It still says these 70 years. And he's talking about Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. Well, we know that there was already an attack earlier from Isaiah chapter 9 that we know about during the week wedding that's taking place, when Haifa and Tel Aviv get attacked, and then the Son of Man comes for 40 days. All right? And when the Son of Man is here for 40 days, what's he warning? He's warning Jerusalem and Judah. All we got to do is go to Luke chapter 21's discourse. When the Son of Man is here for 40 days, he's going to do as Jonah did, which is the 40 days of warning. Look what he says. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. You see? So the first attack of Haifa and Tel Aviv already happened. And then what do we see? Like, it's happened before the end of 70, of course. So this whole warning is about the city of Jerusalem and Judah, so through the southern portion from Jerusalem. And he's not talking about the people here. He's talking about the land, as we've said many times. How long will you not have mercy on Jerusalem, the city, and on the cities, you see, against which you have had indignation these 70 years because of their disobedience in the land? He wants his land to have a rest, and it must rest for 7 years. He can't build the temple until the land rests for 7 years. Hello. That's why you got 7 years of seals before trumpets, and then the temple starts getting built, which we'll see. You see that? So where do we end up? Zechariah chapter 1 is starting from a Tishri count. And then it goes to halfway through the chapter, like halfway through the year, and it's now telling us these 70 years just before. You see, we're not at the red line when the 70 years right here is over. We're just a little bit before it. And then once this is over, the affliction starts, right? Well, lo and behold, that's what it says. He's jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy. He was sore displeased at the heathen that were at ease. Why are they at ease? Because they settled the agreement, right? There was like a peace that was made, kind of quote-unquote peace, that was made after the attack on Haifa and Tel Aviv and Iran and all these guys breaking out in war. That lasted for a week. And then the Son of Man comes. He's not the one that makes the peace, but these nations will make the peace, and he's sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. He was a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Now the tribulation, now Jerusalem is coming to be attacked, and it happens at the end of 70 years. That is a Nisan count right here. 70 years ends, and now Jerusalem, that was compassed about right near the end of the 70, gets attacked. And where are we? We're actually in the middle of Zechariah chapter 1 of 14 years. Pretty awesome, right? Pretty awesome. So that's why I was saying these 3 chapters are so powerful, because one proves unequivocally Nisan, one proves unequivocally Tishri, one proves that Tishri has to come before Nisan, the other one proves Nisan had to come after Tishri, and this one shows that there's a dual thing being worked out on a Tishri side, but acknowledging the Nisan side. It's so awesome. It's beyond gang. It's crazy. Let me show you something else. Remember, I was making a comment about something else happening in this time frame. Remember when I was talking about, if we get this, let me go to it over here. If this Revelation 12 thing, this 6 months period in here, if something happens in here at this Revelation 12, the time of Virgo and seeing something, remember I was saying it might be this connection. I was showing you in relation to, I said it was going to be coming up in Zechariah. And the reason I mention it is not only that it comes before the pre-trib, and that we know these things are all condensed in time. So for this taking place, knowing that the Tishri has already started here in the fall of 2025, if we do see this thing, or if there is whatever this thing is takes place that has people looking up and going, whoa, I believe it may be, as I said, this time of the Smyrna workers, of this remnant worker group being prepared, that would receive an understanding within this, maybe having known in advance, to to start going out and readying the people, letting people know and understand what's taking place. You know, whether we want to take some people's words or audibles to heart that talk on YouTube sometimes. You know, I remember hearing something a few months ago about them saying 2025 is when the group that the Lord has kept in secret and prepared are going to start going into the churches and kind of unseating the pastors, if you will, by going in and speaking truths. Well, what a time this would be. What a fitting time. That's what came to my mind when I realized this was happening first, whatever this might be within this. Maybe there isn't anything obvious, but I mean, Revelation 12:1 is something obvious. And it comes before it all starts. So maybe this is that point. Maybe this is the timing of this coming. I find that very, very interesting. So the other reason I find it interesting in connection to it is because if we go to Zechariah chapter 1, and we see in the 8th month, let me show you how many times the word prophet shows up. In verse 1, verse 4, the word prophets, and look at what he says. Be not as my fathers, unto whom the former prophets have cried, right? Not having listened to the prophets. So it's like this crying out of the prophets. Well, remember the Elijahs, the Elijah company of the end of days. The group is they're prophets, guys. You're being trained in revelation. It's the revelation of prophecy. So this Elijah company of the end, the Moses and the Elijahs, this Elijah company that we talk about, of that two groups of workers, they're prophets as well. I'm not saying you are necessarily right now. We don't know who's who for sure. But that this group will represent a group of prophets as Elijah. Okay? Yeshua, the Lamb of God, he was also a prophet. Right? Well, if this remnant group are the little lambs and the little rocks and the light shining for the Lord for his people and doing his work during this time of seals, then they would also be prophets. I'm not saying that we all are, that you are now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying at that point. And it would be in an understanding of prophecy. And look at this. A warning going out from his servants. Look at this. There's prophets again in verse 5. Look at verse 6. But my words and my statutes, which I commanded my servants the prophets, did they not lay hold of your fathers? You see? So it's like these guys are being warned. Like there's something happening in this fall season to before the 50 end of days begins to warn them, it seems like. And it may coincide that it's happening with whatever this Revelation 12:1 literal sign may be. The word prophet shows up 5 times in just a few verses. In like 7 verses. In the first part of Zechariah chapter 1. With the whole Revelation 12 thing, the possibility of that taking place in Virgo, in Tishri, I just thought, whoa. I hadn't caught the word prophet and prophets spoken so much until I realized it actually was starting in the time of sowing before the 70 years comes to an end. That was pretty wild. Now let's keep going. Go a little bit further. Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah chapter 4. This is another one we know very well. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 4 in our eSword. When we come to Zechariah chapter 4, we have our buddy Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is one of the two once the Lord comes as Messiah ben Joseph Ephraim, when he comes as the ox, when he comes as the high priest King Melchizedek at the end of 6 years of seals, destroying the enemies of Israel, and then the mountain being there in Jerusalem, above it, however that's going to look, in the clouds, I don't know. We know Zerubbabel is going to be his guy that he takes with him, that's going to reign with him. And we see whoever this modern day Zerubbabel will be is going to be the one who lays the foundation of the temple during seals. He's going to be responsible for the laying down of the foundation. And the world is probably going to think that the temple is about to be built, but as we know, the same story will play out in a typology, and only the foundation will be laid during the time of seals. And just like it's found in Zechariah chapter 4, we can do the same thing, as you guys know. We can go to 2 Kings chapter 6. And in 2 Kings chapter 6, the last two verses, it says in verse 37, 38, and verse 37 says, "And in the 4th year was the foundation of the house of the Lord laid. And in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, in the 8th month, was the house finished." 7 years in building total. Okay? Not because it all took 7 years, but because there was a stop after the foundation was laid. And here we are. We've showed this before, right? Here we are in Zechariah chapter 4, and it's Zerubbabel whose hands have laid the foundation of this house. And look at what it says: his hands shall also finish it. Which means Zerubbabel is going to be the one responsible during the first half of trumpets in overseeing the rebuilding of the temple. When we go to the chart, we go to Zechariah chapter 4. Of course, where's it going to be? It's going to be in a Tishri count, right? It's going to be in a Tishri count. And even though it started back here, it looks like it's what? 1, 2, 3, about 3.5 years, which is in the 4th year. But remember, in a sense of when the tribulation begins outside of the above, from when 70 years are over, it's 1, 2, 3. It's only going to seem like it's been 3 years. But that's because now you understand Zechariah begins his count in Tishri. So it's not going to be a count up here and bringing it to the 5th year over here. No, it's taking place in the 4th year. Okay? Somewhere in and around here. I put the arrow for approximate, in and around here. And just because it said, the month of Ziph, maybe that's it, right? That would put the month of Ziph is the month of Iyar. That would put it right here, which is why I have the arrow pointing there. Okay? But it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to play out in the exact same months. Okay? A lot of these things are typologies. But the year counts, the overall general. But those two verses are so specific to the revelation of the end of days. When I showed those verses years ago, I remember people messaging me saying, I was still sort of iffy. I got the 14 years, but I was still a little bit iffy. And then when I saw you show 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 37, 38, I knew it was 14 years. It was done, right? Because it's so crystal clear in the rebuilding of the temple, right? Because once the temple is rebuilt and then Satan is cast down and the pit is opened, it's in the 11th year, which is when the temple is completed being built, and it's the time of fleeing into the wilderness from Revelation 12 to Matthew 24 and the abomination of desolation, this time standing in the holy place because the temple will have been rebuilt. I mean, it's so awesome, right? So again, this is a place we heavily know and have talked about over the years with Zechariah. Now we come to Zechariah chapter 6. We go to Zechariah chapter 6, and now we don't just have Zerubbabel, but we have his partner who is the head, who is, of course, Yeshua Joshua. And we see in verse 6, "Then take the silver, the gold, and make crowns, and set them upon the head of Joshua, the high priest." So what do we know Joshua, Yeshua, Jesus is? He's now the high priest and king. When is the Lord coming? Well, we've covered that numerous times already, right? Now we're just doing it from a Zechariah picture. When is he coming? He's coming at the end of the 6th year of seals. He's coming right in here. So he's defeated the enemies. Now he's being given a crown, right at the end of this 6th year, right before that 7th year starts, because it's in chapter 6, which means the storyline here is in the latter portion of this portion of Zechariah chapter 6. And what does it say? So we know Jesus is the picture here of Joshua, who is the high priest and king Melchizedek as he comes at the end of the 6th year of seals, having defeated the enemies in the Ezekiel 39 war. And now he's receiving his crowns. He is high priest and king. And look what it says. And speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. So who's building the temple of the Lord? Not Joshua. Joshua is the high priest and king. This is Jesus, who is going to be overseeing high priest and king, who is above the Zerubbabel rebuilder. And it's the high priest and king who's leading who? The 144,000. Like John in chapter 15. Okay, he's going to be leading them at the start of trumpets. That's why we read this exact same thing, or this typology, at the end of Mark's gospel. Right? In chapter 16, when you've got that picture of those that they weren't prepared for him, and he rails on them. That's a representation of the 144,000, as you guys know. And then it says, and they follow him wheresoever he goes. Right? And he's with them. This is because it's the time of the high priest and king, who is over the 144,000, and over, of course, Zerubbabel. But it can't be Joshua, the high priest and king, who's the branch who's rebuilding. Because we just read in chapter 4 that the one who laid the foundation is Zerubbabel, and it's Zerubbabel who we're told is going to build the temple. You see? So you've got the high priest and king, and which is Jesus, Joshua, Yeshua, and you've got Zerubbabel. And how do we know they're two different ones? Well, we just read the rest of it. Even he shall build the temple. Well, who's building the temple? Not the high priest and king Zerubbabel. And so what does it say? Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall build bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. Shall be between them both. Okay? We know because these are the two witnesses. Whoever the modern day Zerubbabel is, if you're here during tribulation, or you're hearing this in the midst of tribulation of seals, or you're a worker, you're already going to know this. But those in the midst, if they ever come across this, whoever that guy is overseeing the rebuilding and doing the building of the foundation of the temple during seals, that's one of your two witnesses. That is your modern day Zerubbabel, and that's going to be the guy that when the Lord comes with paradise, heavenly Mount Zion, he's going to go be with the Lord and reign there with the Lord, but the Lord is above him because he is high priest who's directly connected to the Father, and from there Zerubbabel is going to oversee the rebuilding of the temple. Look at what it even says in the final verse of chapter 16, okay? Of chapter 6. We come to verse 15. And listen to what it says. And they that are far off. Remember, he still has to gather them to him. Remember, it's going to take that 1.5 years for all of them to make their way back. But along the way, some will make it in earlier. There'll be the burying of the bones. And then the rebuilding will take place. So it says, and they that are far off shall come and build in the temple. Okay? It's not Zerubbabel who's going to literally build the whole thing. He's going to oversee the rebuilding with those that come back and who are going to help him. So when does that take place? That was to the end of the 6th. We have the 7th year of seals, which again, this is while they're making their way back. We know the great multitude rapture. We know the 144 sealed, right? That happens right here, right towards the end, because they're going to help bring in the great multitude, as we showed earlier. And then they got to still make their way, and people are still making their way from places they were scattered all across the earth, where the Lord is going to separate the sea on their way back. We know that this was shown to us as 1.5 years. So now watch what happens. We know the wording, we've talked about Zechariah chapter 7 before, but now let's go to Zechariah chapter 8. Remember, it's counting on a Tishri side. So we go to Zechariah chapter 8, verse 2 and 3. In Zechariah chapter 8, how many times have we taught on this, right? This is the beginning of trumpets time. And being that it's a Tishri to Tishri count, we now know it's a trumpets time. It's the 8th year, kind of like John the Baptist, right? Chapter 8. But where is it going to be? Chapter 8 is what? It's the 8th chapter, but it's also like the year 1 in the next set of 7. You see? So it's the same story like we were talking about earlier in relation to John. This was the 7th. This is chapter 8 of John. You see, because he had 21 chapters, whereas Zechariah has 14 chapters, and this becomes the 8th. Okay? So what do we have? We come to Zechariah chapter 8, verse 2 and 3, and look at how it starts. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion. So in chapter 1, I am jealous, but in chapter 8, I was. Why? Well, now he's here. Jerusalem has had its rest, and he is now back, and it's time to start rebuilding. So he says, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion with a great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with a great fury. Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, and the mountain, what mountain? The mountain he came with, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Okay, so when would this be? I would say right where this points at, right at the start of chapter 8, right at the start of the next 7 years of trumpet judgments. But is there a trumpet that happens right away? No, I don't think so. I'm going to show you how I see this playing out based on what we read. Now, remember what we read in chapter 6. At the very end of chapter 6, like the very end of this 6th year of seals, it says, and they that are far off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord. Okay? So they're far off, they have to make their way. We did a teaching on this not too long ago as we realized that there is a house of Israel, still a natural house of Israel somewhere on the earth. Just as we all know there's a house of Judah. But the Gentiles are grafted in to the house of Israel. And the grafted in house of Israel, the grafted in Gentiles to the house of Israel are going to be the ones gone in the great multitude rapture, taken into paradise, okay, which is part of the kingdom of God, just as the third heaven is, but it's another part of it, right? And once they're gone, which is the branch that was grafted in is now broken off and the dove takes them, then you've got the house of Israel that still remains making their way back, and then you've got the house of Judah that also makes their way back. And that period would seem to be that year and a half that we even saw and taught on from the Apocrypha in relation to 2nd Esdras, when the 10 tribes in relation to the true house of Israel makes their way back, and he stops the channels of water again, and it had taken them, where is it? I got it a piece more of it's somewhere in here, where it took them a year and a half. So there are those that were scattered not too far, and there were those that were scattered further away, and those scattered further, those that went into a land they knew not and have to make their way back. It took a year and a half. It even talks in the last times until now. Came back. I was sure I had it properly highlighted. I don't know where it went now, but it's in here somewhere, and we've talked about it before. So what ends up happening is we have from this mid first year of trumpets to the end of seals, that year and a half that we talked about. But remember what it said at the end of this 6th year, that there are those who are scattered far off that he's going to come back to help build. Well, if we know there's a year and a half, and we can show maybe what will take place in this first portion, well, what would appear to take place in the first portion is, of course, the Lord is there on Zion, and it's established, okay? Heavenly Mount Zion, paradise, he's come with Eden. It's established there. It's the holy mountain of the Lord. But are the people back yet? Are all the people that he said he was going to bring back here, are they all back right at the start of the 8th year of trumpets after just 1 year? Or is there still maybe 6 more months before everybody comes back? Well, let's read what he says next. Let's go to verse 7. I think I wrote it on here too. Verse 7 through 9 of Zechariah chapter 8. Starting in verse 7. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country. You see, are they all there yet? No, it seems like he's still bringing some back. He's already there on Mount Zion. Okay, he's going to start bringing them back. There shall be old men and old women. They shall dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man his staff in hand. The city is full with boys and girls playing. The remnant of his people coming. And what does he say? Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country. So he's still bringing people. There's some people there already. There's some people that made it, but he's still bringing people from the east and the west. And it says, and I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, in truth and in righteousness. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong, you that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets. By the mouth of the prophets? Didn't we just cover that? Well, when were these prophets? Listen to this. Which were in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of hosts was laid. Which means there had to be prophets here during the time of seals. Who are they? They are the Elijah company. Okay? The ones being prepared. And what does it say? That the temple might be built. So here we are. There's the Lord. He's on Mount Zion. It's the holy mountain of the Lord. Some people have made it back, some young, some old. But there's still a remnant of his people and people that he's bringing back from the east and west. And the temple hasn't started being built yet. Hello. The temple still hasn't started being built. It doesn't start getting built until around this point, give or take midish. He even says it down here in verse 13 when he says, and it shall come to pass that as you were a curse among the heathen, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so will I save you, and you shall be a blessing. Fear not, listen to this, but let your hands be strong. Let your hands be strong for what? It's time to start rebuilding. Which means it doesn't appear that the rebuilding is going to start as soon as the Lord is now established there at the beginning of the 8th year on Mount Zion. It would appear it starts a little bit further into it, which would be that year and a half that the Apocrypha tells us and that we associated in a previous teaching with Darius and that connection to Darius, right? And the 6th year and the whole count with Darius, it brought us to the same point. We've understood this. We've taught on it. So we've got two witnesses from the Apocrypha and from Scripture in accounting as Darius and the typology of who Darius is in the prophetic as Christ in that picture, and it's in this same time frame. Well, if that's the case, what happens then is, of course, this first half of the first year of trumpets, he's bringing people back. They've been coming back in, and he's still bringing back more to then start rebuilding the temple, right? Watch this. So it's all going to start in this point here. Well, what about Revelation chapter 8? Revelation chapter 8, we've talked about it not too long ago, and it was something that for quite a while, maybe even a few years, had me scratching my head. Why is the seventh seal spoken about in Revelation chapter 8, verse 1? Why didn't they finish that one verse? Why didn't they stick it at the end of Revelation chapter 7, verse 17? They could have stuck it one more verse right here and be done with it, because that was the end of seals. But for some reason, we find it in the beginning of the 8th chapter. Interesting, right? You know why it's interesting? Because those of you who have been around for a little bit, how many times have we shown that the layout of verses within a chapter in so many places have prophetic implications? One example I'll show you guys briefly is the Transfiguration story. The story of Luke's Transfiguration, and the reason for all 27 verses in the typology of the prophetic. The reason for all of these 27 verses before the coming of the Son of Man on the 8th day, 8th year connection is because it relates to the events of the pre-trib in the 40 days that come first. When you come to Mark's transfiguration story, you only get one verse before the transfiguration starts. And why is that? Because this is when they will have seen him come. What is this? It's the very end of the 6th year of seals, when the whole world at the end of the 6th seal in Revelation 6, when they see him come and everybody's freaking out, this Ezekiel 39 war takes place. They shall have seen him come. Okay? Past tense. They didn't go right away. They saw him before their time of going will come. And then you've got the after 6 days. So they see him come towards the end of 6, and then once 6 is over, meaning sometime in the 7th, there he is at the beginning of the 7th, and then their time to go will follow. And it just so happens, as a little side note, that it even talks about the great multitude here. Not in Luke, not in Matthew. Funny, right? It's so awesome. And then look at this. Look in Matthew's. In Matthew chapter 17, the transfiguration is instant. There's no verses at all before it. Why? Because as we saw in Matthew chapter 24, it said, once this time comes, what did it say? Immediately after the tribulation of those days. Meaning they're not going to see something happen first. There's not going to be this, not going to be that. Bam! 6 years are done. The event happens, as we know, and he immediately returns as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. No verses before it. And we have taught this and shown this in so many different books that when I caught this in Revelation chapter 8 a long time ago, I couldn't understand it, and I set it aside, and I pondered it again, and I set it aside. It wasn't until this that I realized the reason I see it in chapter 8 is always a prophetic reasoning. There is always a prophetic revelation in it. And look at this. What is this? Chapter 8, right? It's the first year of what we would call the 7 years of trumpets. But it's the 8th. Just as it is for Zechariah, chapter 8, starting in verse 1, 2, 3. Just as it was with John in chapter 8 being the first one. Here we are in Revelation chapter 8, verse 1, and we have the 7th seal. Well, guess what? Seals, you can see here as well, right? We would still be in the 7th year on a Nisan count for the 7th seal to take place, because it's the 7th seal. But guess what? Being in the 8th chapter, look at where it lines up to. It would be at the beginning of the first year of trumpet judgments, or the 8th year as the 8th chapter in the 7th year on a Nisan side, happening at the time what? When there would now be half hour of silence in heaven. Okay? Silence in heaven. He opened the 7th seal, and there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour, which I've always believed is about 6 months, probably 5 months, because the 7 months were probably the bearing of the bones. Hello? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Remember what's happening here? Do you remember what's going to happen here once he's got the house of Israel and the house of Judah brought in, for those that have accepted what has come, and they've understood it? Because remember, the Jews are waiting for their Messiah, who will come and destroy all their enemies that came against them, and then will decree to get the temple rebuilt. Most Jews at that point of the house of Judah will recognize that this is their Messiah, who was the first Messiah, but he blinded them for us. But now the church's time will be over, and their eyes will open. This is why when we're in Zechariah chapter 8 and we follow it down, we see the piece we've talked about in chapter 10, in verse 10 of chapter 8, that there was no man for hire nor beast, neither was there any peace. Remember, because the dove was taken, right? Peace was taken. The anointing came upon that remnant group and the apostles. They had the Holy Ghost power, and then peace is removed, and that's when Jerusalem is attacked. And the Lord is telling him here in chapter 8, in the 8th year, that there was no peace or anything because of the affliction, for I set the red horse rider out, every man against his neighbor, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. That's the red horse rider. And now here he is explaining this to them, what had happened, and who's he saying is there? The house of Israel and the house of Judah. You see, the house of Judah is also there. They're also there. Now, so when we see this, what does that mean? Well, if we go to Jeremiah 31, I'm trying to speed up here. We are close. We are close. If we go to Jeremiah 31, you guys will remember this, right? We see the great multitude rapture in verse 8, right? The great company, which means great multitude. We've talked about it. We then see Ephraim, right? The Lord there, his firstborn, the Messiah ben Joseph ben Ephraim. We see that he's talking to the house of Judah and Israel when he says down here, listen to this, when he makes his new covenant. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers. You see, remember, he's making a new covenant, right? This new, renewed, this new covenant that he's making at the end of seals. So why do we need this about half an hour of peace, which is really the end of the 7th seal in the 7th year, but really in the first portion, reason it's in chapter 8, because it's in the beginning right here. Well, because the Lord is here on heavenly Mount Zion, and he's renewed now the house of Israel with the house of Judah. He's made a new covenant. This would probably be that half-hour silence. Pretty wild, right? Pretty incredibly wild. Now, let's start bringing this to a close. We're almost done. We don't have much more with Zechariah. We're going to go to Zechariah chapter 11 just briefly. Zechariah 11 we know very well. Zechariah chapter 11. We know that this is about when Satan's cast down, right? Verse 2, howl, fir tree, for the cedar is fallen because the mighty are spoiled. Howl, all you oaks of Bashan, for the vintage of old is come down. We end up seeing that there are 3 shepherds, and the Lord cuts them off in one day, right? Also, I cut off 3 shepherds in 1 month, sorry. And listen what he says in verse 9. Then said I will not feed you that die, let die. That be cut off, let it be cut off, and let the rest eat every one the flesh of another. What? This is when Satan's cast down, and the pit is open. All hell breaks loose, worse than what it was at mid-seals. And I took my staff, even beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant, which I had made with all people. Okay? Now, again, I like the correction in understanding this. The covenant is broken. It's not the Lord who broke it. He's breaking it because of what the people have done, because of what has happened, and Satan being cast down and the pit being opened. Okay? And it's being broken what? With all people. Well, when did he make this covenant? At the beginning of the 8th year. Probably the 7th seal with the half hour of silence. And he says, and it was broken in that day. Why? Because the typology of the 30 pieces of silver, as found only in Matthew's gospel, is the price paid for the son of perdition, right? The 30 pieces of silver. The typology that Judas Iscariot plays, right? The 30 pieces of silver. It's only mentioned in Matthew because it relates prophetically to the end of days when Satan's cast down and the pit is opened. That happens in the 11th year. So in the midst of the 11th year, when this happens, Satan's cast down, the pit is open, and this is the cutoff that happens now in Daniel chapter 9, when Messiah is cut off after about 3.5 years. So if the rebuilding, remember, the 8th year starts here, right? Trumpet starts here with the Lord there. But the rebuilding probably won't start till mid-trumpets. So if we go 1, 2, 3, and what do we know? It was about 3 years and 2 months, right? 60 as actual weeks and 2 weeks as years, right? Weeks of years. So we talked about that in the past with Daniel, that the rebuilding might be 3 years and 2 months. So that might be like just above here in the springtime. And Satan's cast down, and you've got your 1, 2, your 1, 2, and about a half years right into here. When the Lord returns feet down. Well, when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, is Satan destroyed right away? No, it's not instant. Even the beast and the false prophet are going to be the first two taken before the war and cast into the lake of fire. Right? So it's going to be right shortly at some point in Tishri, but not right away immediately. Right? The war is going to come. That's why when we go to Ezekiel 14, we'll see this reading of what takes place when the Lord comes feet down and the battle as the final days of Noah takes place. So what we're seeing is, again, what do we know about Zechariah 11? It's about the midst of the 4th year. The rebuilding of the temple took place for about, we always say, I've been saying for years, about 3.5 years. Could be 3 years and give or take 2 months. And we know at this time it's when Satan's been cast down from Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. And we know that he is given a time, times, and a half. There's no and here because it's only 2.5 years, which brings you from the midst of the 4th year or the 11th year of tribulation, about 10.5 years, and it brings you to the end of 14 years or the end of 13 years to the Lord coming here. That's about 2.5 years right there. But what else happens? We've got Revelation chapter 12. So Revelation chapter 12, Satan is cast down. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth right at this same time. Right? The connection to Zechariah chapter 11, verse 2. And he's going to go after her with a flood, and she's going to be taken on the wings of an eagle, right? For a time and times and half a time. So that's going to start at about the same time, mid 11th year on the trumpet side, on the Tishri side. And it's going to last how long? 1, 2, 3.5. Because it's time plus times, 1 plus 2 plus a half, that's 3.5. Whereas Daniel's was 1, 2 plus a half, 2.5. So his ends somewhere early, right here at Tishri, at the start of the 14th at the return of the Lord, feet down on the Mount of Olives. And those who fled away on wings of an eagle, their 3.5 years ends right here when the Lord will declare the Jubilee. And when he declares the Jubilee, you know what happens. He's got to replenish the earth, and then they have to make their way back. And when they make their way back, mid-Jubilee, they're given all back their land, bringing us all the way back to Ezekiel. It's so wild. It's so flippin' unbelievable. It's craziness. Let's go finish this up now with Zechariah chapter 14. Chapter 14 is awesome. You'll remember there was even a connection that came from watch this, Ezekiel chapter 39, to wrap it all back around. In Zechariah 39, you guys now clearly know it's that end of the 6th year of seals time frame, and look what happens. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, I lost it. Oh, it was about the war. Because what we end up seeing is in Zechariah chapter 14, just before the return of the Lord feet down, we hear this conversation, right? When it says in verse 2, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. Okay? To battle. And it says, and the city shall be, oh, where was this battle? Oh, it was either in Joel 3, or it was connected to, no, I think it was Joel 3. That we have this battle, right? So he's going to gather them to battle, okay, in Jerusalem. This final war. This is the treading of the grapes war. And it says, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And it says, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. This is the past tense of the Ezekiel 39 battle. Okay? This one right here, 71:28, isn't the same word for war. This was the battle at the end of the 6th year of seals, the Ezekiel 39 war. So he's saying he's going to go fight in this battle as when he fought in the last one, which means there's two swords for the Lord, as we've taught. And look at what we see. And his feet shall stand on that day on the Mount of Olives. And his feet shall stand on that day on the Mount of Olives. Right here. Right to the end. Right here, it's the start. The arrow kind of over crosses with it. It's the start right here of the 14th year for the 14th chapter of Zechariah. This is when the Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives. Satan has had his 2.5 years, even from Zechariah 11 that we see. He's got his 2.5 years, as Daniel chapter 12 told us that he would have 2.5 years. That starts in Zechariah 11, leaving 2.5 years. And when the Lord returns feet down, what do we know about when he returns feet down? We know that he's talking about Revelation, or sorry, that was Satan coming down there. We know that it's talking about, let me get back to where I was. When he returns feet down, it's Matthew, there we go, Matthew chapter 24. So if we go to Matthew chapter 24, when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, watch what happens. It's when he's coming as lightning from one end to the other, right? We just showed it a little earlier. In verse 27, he comes as lightning shining from one end to the other, and it's his coming at his coming, which is immediately after the tribulation of those days, after they again happened, like an hour later, and then boom, right there at the end of tribulation. And we see that here he is coming. He's coming on the clouds. It's not the word in, even though it says in. It's the word on the clouds this time. And he tells us that at his coming, it's going to be as it was in the days of Noah. The days of Noah were 1 year and 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, it's the Day of Atonement and the blowing of the shofar for the Jubilee. You see? But watch what happens. We know that it's connected also to Daniel chapter 12, as we were saying, that we know Satan, he's saying, how long, O Lord? How long, how much time is he going to have? In Daniel 12:7. And he says it'll be for a time, times, and a half. That's 1, 2, plus a half. And then he says what? And when he shall have scattered, accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. Remember, they were there with the Lord until mid-trumpets. Then the cutoff happens. War breaks out against the two witnesses for the 2.5 years. And then when the 2.5 years are done, or during those 2.5 years, the people had already fled at mid-trumpets, and they're now taken until the 14th year is over. But they don't have to, so they don't have to come back, having fled away for 3.5 years. They don't come back until the 14 years are over. Okay? And what does it say? To accomplish, to have scattered the power of the holy people. All these things shall be finished. So where does this bring us to? This brings us to Zechariah chapter 14, when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. The 2.5 years that Satan has now come to an end. The Lord is now instantly, immediately coming down, feet down on the Mount of Olives. And when he does, we were told that it will be finished. So when we go to Revelation chapter 10, we read in verse 7, it says, but in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, this is the trumpet, when he shall begin to sound. So as soon as that seventh angel trumpet sounds, the mystery of God should be finished, completed. This is because Satan's time, his 2.5 years are over. When the scattering of the people is over, the Lord will return, feet down on the Mount of Olives. At the very start, immediately after that 13th year of tribulation, or that 6th year of trumpet judgments is over. And what do we see happen? It tells us, Revelation 11:15, and the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. That's at the final year. He's coming, feet down, destroy them. It will be as it was in the days of Noah. The Satan will have had his final days, but remember what Zechariah 14 says. Zechariah 14 isn't like an instant demolishing of everybody right away. Right? Look at what it says. Remember what it said in the other one? And Joel told us from Ezekiel, 7 years of burning the weapons, and then we get Joel to the end of trumpets, as Joel chapter 3 verse 10, saying that they would beat their plowshares into pruning hooks and so forth. They're now building them back into weapons. It's the time of the king's winepress, and it says that the Jews, he's going to destroy them with fire, and their tongues are going to melt in their mouth, their eyes are going to consume in their sockets. But look who's going to help. It says, and Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem. That's why they're beating their plowshares back into spears and their pruning hooks back into swords. All in order. And when that final year, as the days of Noah, is done, the Lord will renew the earth, as Ezekiel 47. And in the midst, in the year of the final Jubilee, those who were gone away into the wilderness will have heard the trumpet blast, will make their way back, and they will all receive every man their portion of land in the final Jubilee and the beginning of the millennial reign, with the Lord and his faithful servants having been resurrected to take part in his glory with him, as they were told in 1 Peter, who served him and who sacrificed themselves, being beheaded, will be resurrected to rule and reign with him. And at the end of the millennial reign, they will have no part in the second death. Boom. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that absolutely wild? I know for many of you, it'll probably take more than one listen. If you've listened to the whole thing, well, at least the listening to it the second time, you could skip probably the first half hour or whatever it was all in, as I was setting you guys up to explain it, to prepare your minds. That's why I went into further detail in the beginning, because it was going to be a lot covered. It was going to be a lot of detail. And now you understand why we can't put all the charts for these chapters to years in one in one single chart. It's not possible. God is good. His Spirit is leading in truth. I am grateful. I appreciate you guys. I thank you all. I thank you, Tammy, for your help in putting this all together. Otherwise, it would have never happened. I could have never done it. I'm so grateful. I thank you guys. I pray for you. I pray for your blessings, for your families, for our friends, for everybody we're sharing the gospel with, for people's eyes and ears and hearts to be open to receive. Brothers and sisters, God is good, and his Spirit is leading in the word. Let us be watching and praying always. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you always and forever. Bye for now.